Council, as you all know, very sadly, Councillor Jennifer Pegg died last week, very suddenly. And I would like to ask those people who would like to make tributes to her to make them, after which we will have a minute's silence. But Councillor Price, do you wish to start?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I think the news of Jennifer's untimely death was a huge shock to everyone on the council and everyone who knew her in the Labour Party, and met with immense sadness because she was a delightful person, funny, humorous, very dedicated to the people of her ward, but also the city more generally, seeking to tackle the problems of homelessness, problems of poverty that disfigure our society. And she felt very strongly about that, and that was something which motivated her very strongly. She was a fantastic colleague, very loyal, and always willing to pick up tasks when others would shrink back. She would come forward and say, yes, I'll do it. And that energy, that commitment was something which carried right through to the end, which is why it was such a shock when the news came through of her death. Because in the week before, I'd been at 2 meetings with her. She seemed to be on good form and very happy and very much part of the group and the council. So it is with immense sadness that we heard about that very untimely and very unfortunate way of dying. We will remember her very fondly, and know that others will want to say similar things.
Who else? Councillor Simmons?
Yes, news, as Bob said, news of Jennifer Pegg's death came as a huge shock to us all. In the relatively short time she was on the council, she made, I think, a very significant and worthwhile contribution on certainly the many committees I sat that she was on. She was always engaged. Not only was she personable, friendly and funny, but her lively personality and her sort of cheery welcomes and her sort of mid-Atlantic twang just made her very much a natural centre of attention at any meeting. She was always engaged, always questioning, always very much part of the meeting, not aside from it. And this was her great strength, I think. When other new councillors may have feared to tread, she stepped boldly, asking, unpretentious, folksy, down-to-earth questions that we all might have presumed we knew the answer to. But invariably, Jennifer's way of asking shed very much fresh light on every and each subject that she tackled. She stands, in fact, as a shining example to councillors new and old. Never stop asking questions. And our thoughts go out very much to the Jennifer's family and friends.
Councillor Brandt?
Lord Mayor, I would like to say a few words. We all come here for making some changes and differences and have differences in different political colours as well. But there's one thing which is common in everybody, which is a human touch and being a human, trying to speaking each other. I have known Jennifer since 2014 when she came to Headington to help David Henwood, and I've saw her more than David Henwood and spoke to her more than David, and she tells me David is the candidate and I'm trying to help and support him. So many times we met in the street, talked about different things, different issues. She was a resident of the Northeast area, which I live too. But more than that, I have also noticed since she came to the council, she spoke about the ordinary things which does matter to the people rather than just making party politics. She was at the Scrutiny Committee where you may all remember she spoke about the Donington and Rosedale Advice Centre and spoke very strongly, and she had a sympathy, and I had very strong support with that as well, what she said on that day. There are some of the services which we think they do serve the people, and that's why we are here, rather than just a party politics sake. We just try to, say whatever we can and do whatever we can. So I had a number of conversations with her during the election, after election, since she became councillor, always saying hello when we are seeing at the town hall. So it was a friendly personality and is going to be really missed at this council. So my sympathy to her family and the friends and colleagues. So it was really a shocking news, but I am sure that there is, as we all believe, there is another life after this, and I hope that she rests in the peace and have another life. And as we all try to do our bit, and she done her bit, and which will be remembered by this council. Thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Jennifer was a friend and comrade who I'll miss tremendously, and the fact she has left us so suddenly has yet to properly sink in. Jennifer was one of the first people that I got to know in the Oxford Labour Party, and she welcomed me and encouraged my involvement, as I know that she did many others here, especially women members of the party. Jennifer was a dedicated Labour Party activist and played a central part in the life of our local party as an executive committee member and member of the Women's Forum. Jennifer was always there, making things happen, rolling up her sleeves to muck in and get things done. Her contribution was always selfless. Jennifer hated being the centre of attention. She was happy to work with others as part of a collective effort to achieve results and share in her successes. We became friends, and I always enjoyed spending time with Jennifer, whether it was over a glass of wine in the Blenheim, a cup of coffee in the Lees Leisure Centre, or sheltering from the rain in her enormous vehicle, which often doubled as a mobile campaign centre when we were outdoor stepping in the Lees. Jennifer was fun to be with. She wasn't above the odd bit of harmless political gossip. I admired the way she was unafraid to be brutally honest to anyone, and she did not suffer fools gladly. She had a dry sense of humour and a quick wit. She loved to crack jokes and laugh with her friends. Jennifer enjoyed talking about politics and held strong political opinions, but that doesn't mean that they were always predictable. She was as equally proud of having been a founding member of the SDP as she was as having voted for Jeremy Corbyn in the leadership election of our party. Whatever conclusions Jennifer drew, they were always arrived at through her anger about the inequalities in this world and her motivation to make things better. Jennifer was a hard-working ward councillor, committed to improving living standards for residents in Greater Lees and Blackbird Lees. And it's so sad that Jennifer has been taken from us prematurely when she still had so much more that she wanted to do. Jennifer will be sorely missed by all her friends and her comrades in this chamber, and I offer my condolences to her family and to her friends near and afar who had the privilege of having Jennifer in their lives.
Councillor Taylor, do you wish to say something?
Yes, as people will know, I was Jennifer's ward councillor, and I really don't think I can add anything beyond what Linda has just said, apart from that Saturday mornings will never be the same again. I have memories of meeting at 11, sitting in Jennifer's car, putting the world to rights for half an hour before we thought, yes, maybe we had better go and knock on a few doors. And then, you know, going out for an hour or so while she thrust leaflets at local residents with exhortations to keep it by the phone. You never know when you might need us. I will miss her hugely, and I'm just very, very sad that she's not here anymore.
Thank you. Could we stand for a minute's silence? Next, we have apologies for absence. Jennifer?
Lord Mayor, we have apologies for this meeting from Councillors Anwar, Thomas, Gough, Humberston, Ligo and Councillor Turner apologises for lateness.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I have a personal interest in item 8 and I'll leave at that time.
We move on to the minutes of the last meeting. Does anyone have any criticisms of those minutes, or can we approve them as a correct record? Thank you. Then appointments to committees. Councillor Price.
Lord Mayor, because of the sad death of Jennifer Pegg, we'd like to appoint Councillor Paule to the Scrutiny Committee and Councillor Tidball to the West Area Planning Committee.
Thank you. Oh, is Council happy with those appointments? Yes, thank you very much. They are hereby appointed. Some announcements. I have one or two things I would like to say. Perhaps the first thing not to forget is that we expect a break for tea at 6:30, so that we can be back at 7 to hear the public speakers, as they're expecting to come at 7. I think we should break at 6:30, wherever we've got to in the agenda. A couple of things I've been doing. You will all have known about Remembrance Day, and it was nice to see a lot of colleagues joining us, a lot of people, a lot of the services, a lot of guides and brownies. I'm not sure when I've seen quite so many of them, but it was a very moving service as ever, and we were very pleased that we were joined by the Mayor of Leiden, by the Deputy Mayor of Bonn, and by a representative from Perm, our twin cities. More recently, we have had a visit from the French ambassador to give the Légion d'honneur to 2 wonderful Oxford residents in their 90s. It was a very moving occasion last week. We've had a visit from a number of judges, very senior people from Pakistan. And next week we have a parliamentary delegation from Cuba. So a lot of things happening. We should very much like to welcome Anita Bradley as our new Head of Law and Governance. Welcome, Anita. Very pleased to have you. And we would like to thank Lindsay Kane for standing in the interim, for holding the fort, keeping everything going. We pass that on. Then next Monday, there is a film in aid of my charities, something called Poverty Inc. We have some posters here and there. Basically, are we doing the right thing by giving people food, or should we be doing rather more to give them the means to grow their own food? It's a rather worthwhile discussion, and interesting points will be made. There are people from various organisations, from Oxfam, from Practical Action, from other people involved in trying to help people in the, well, what I can call the developing world. It's in the Mayday Trust are the people who suggested this film. They are the people who are helping to meet some of the needs of our homeless people in the city with a new way of working, helping people to move forward, not concentrating on what they can't do, what their problems are, but on what they can do, helping them to live in small communities, develop their self-confidence, their skills, and move on to pick up life again. So I hope that many of you will be able to come and encourage other people to come as well. And of course we have a carol concert on the 17th, Sunday, tickets for sale. If there's still any left, I'm not sure. They can be purchased from the cards shop, and I hope that that will be welcome. The other thing is that we're having a group who will be interpreting the carols in British Sign Language, which is an innovation, and I'm very pleased to be able to do that. And we have a choir who will do a performance of Silent Night in this way, which is great. And of course we have a Christmas reception on the 11th of December. Please come. Bring your friends, all your guests, and it will be good to get together again as Christmas is getting quite a lot closer. But tonight, we've already got a Christmas tree in the Lord Mayor's parlour, and we've got a few bottles, just to say if people would like, please, to come along and help to drink the contents of those bottles, and just join in a, what do you call it, convivial drink, that's the way, after council. It will be very nice to see everybody there, if they can possibly come. there are the bottles waiting to be opened. So we'll see you later. Right, Sheriff, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, if I knew John would join for the drink, I would have bought the bottle. Lord Mayor, on 9th of November, we had the Freeman's admission ceremony. 6 people were admitted as a new Freeman, and they came with their guest, and it was quite a good evening. And there is a Freeman dinner on the 1st of December. So that's all from the Sheriff's side. Thank you.
Or from Councillor Price?
Not an announcement, Lord Mayor, but a question to you, because you haven't given us the very important information as to who's singing the King and the Page in King Wenceslas on the Carol service. We do need to know that to know whether to come one.
I can assure you you can come safely because I shall not be doing it. The story that I told Tom Morto in talking about this, I was at a very musical school, a small class of 14 girls, and I was the only one who wasn't in the school choir. So you see, it would be a great risk. Very good people coming to sing. So, Chief Executive, do you have any? Nothing. Chief Finance Officer? Monitoring Officer? Right, thank you. Then we move on to item 7, the Museum of Oxford Hidden Histories. Councillor Sinclair, I think, will speak to the recommendations. No.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The reason that this report is in front of Council today is because we need to endorse the increase in the budget as set out in the recommendations. There are 3 sorry, I lost my place. There are 3 recommendations. 2 of them are about the financial position. The second one is about the capital budget and the capital contribution. The information behind that is in paragraphs 22 to 25. And then in the third recommendation is the increase in revenue budget. The reason is actually set out in the report. I think it's paragraph 11. The initial funding from this, supported by the Heritage Lottery funding, was the feasibility study that took place. And as usual, if anyone's actually been involved in doing any of this type of work, setting out that first figure, there were things that were found in the building that had to be addressed. And I think as well the vision for the project actually developed as well. It's a very exciting project. We are aspiring to be a world-class city, and in order to do that we need a world-class museum for the people of Oxford in all their diversity, that we need to tell that story. We are limited in terms of space at the moment, and we have so many more objects that we would like to display. So there will be more space for those objects, but also more space for activities. I mean, I can recall coming to the old museum and bringing school children very frequently. So that would be brilliant to be able to have that link with the education of our young people in the city. There is a charitable trust that has been set up to fundraise. It's early days, but that's moving forward quite quickly now. So I'm asking you for your support for the 3 recommendations. Thank you.
Any speakers? Councillor Gant?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Just to say, we're happy to support this. I think it's says in paragraph 38 that if we want a decent museum, this is the best option. Yes, we do. I think it's a very exciting plan. Would just note that we all understand that when you start poking around in old buildings, you find things you weren't expecting, and that it causes prices to go up. Interesting that it never seems to cause prices to go down, but there you go. This is quite a substantial increase. I was wondering if there was any particular reason for that.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? Councillor Simmons?
We'll also be supporting this motion, but have some of the same reservations, I think, that Andrew has, and I'm sure many Labour members have as well. I mean, this is a substantial increase in cost to be funded from prudential borrowing. And this is rather unusual use of prudential borrowing, because normally we would spend to save, essentially. We would invest something where there was an increased return. And yet here we're also being asked for an increase in the revenue budget. So as well as increasing capital, we're also increasing the revenue demand. And that is a slippery slope, and we should be using our capital and our borrowing wisely, because as everyone knows, there's many demands on our money, and especially our borrowing. And we're talking later about housing and homelessness, for example, which is a very worthy use of money. We've obviously got issues around traffic and transport. And so these seem to be sort of, to me at least, higher priorities. We are supporting this because I see it delivers many other things, such as DDA compliance, which is very worthy and worthwhile, and we need to do anyway. I'm concerned, and maybe Dee can sort of settle some of my concerns around the financing, because this seems an unusual use of prudential borrowing.
Anybody else? Sorry, just wondering.
Sorry.
Yes, Councillor Simmons.
Yep, thank you. Can't see me. No, obviously I'd like to, I'd like to support this bid, and I'd like to encourage others to so do. And I'd like to make the point that there are two allied but external bodies who are involved in supporting this new museum development. One is the Friends of the Museum, and the other one is the Museum Development Trust. And I want to make the point, in case people aren't aware, that the fundraising process is an ongoing one, and it will continue throughout the development of the building. But I mean, the way to look at it is, we've got a 1.7 million investment in our city, and it's something that's going to be for all of our citizens, all our communities. It's called Hidden Histories. It's, it will be a lot of things that you don't know about and I don't know about, we're going to find out about. But lots and lots of events are happening in the museum. We had a great evening last week when local businesses and shops came and talked about particular artefacts that they had that related to the history of the city. And I think with those of us that attended learned a lot. So, keep an eye on those events, get involved, find out more about the museum, and give us your support, because it's a really exciting project and we want to see it come to fruition in the next few years.
Thank you. Councillor Price?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I think both Andrew and Craig expressed concerns which are quite natural amongst members, and we've certainly had those discussions in the Labour group about the project. I mean, a few points I think to point out. The first thing is that although it's down on the report as being financed by prudential borrowing, there are some capital receipts coming in which we expect to get, which could actually use it rather than prudential borrowing. But probably more importantly is the business plan which we've had to put together to get the Heritage Lottery funding for this project, which is a very large sum of money from the HLA, does indicate very significant revenue potential in the medium to long term. From two sources. One is that we would plan to charge non-Oxford residents to visit the museum. So that's something which I think, given the volume of tourism which we have in the city, we want to try and tap into, rather than just by getting them to buy things in the shop. To actually pay a small fee to enter the place would be sensible. And secondly, probably equally important, is the fact that as a space, it's going to be very good for a range of events which we can hire it out for. As colleagues will know, a lot of places around the university are used in exactly that kind of way, and they make a lot of money out of it. We, I think, could do the same. The town hall is very successful in raising revenue in that way, but we have limited space in the town hall. This is going to give us extra space in a very interesting environment with artefacts in the various rooms, which will actually be part of the backdrop. The last point I would make is one that Christine's raised, which is that for people growing up in the city, this museum will for the first time present the history of the city from the eyes of the people, looking at the very successive waves of immigration from the countryside in the 19th century, from Wales and Scotland and Ireland in the era of the Cowley growth, and then more recently from the Caribbean and from the Asian subcontinent. And that is something which I think is going to be really significant, because it will be created by the communities themselves, as you saw in the small exhibition we had last year in the museum. So it is something which will actually be very much part of the education provision of this city. So it's something which in the long term will stand really as a tribute to our ancestors and forefathers and foremothers, but also it'll be something which the people of the city can be proud of. So I think it's a really great project and one which we should definitely support.
Councillor Sinclair?
Thank you. Thank you for Councillor Sim and Councillor Price. Their enthusiasm is palpable. And it was very clear the other evening, the event that I attended was absolutely fascinating. So I would endorse the invitation. Please go along to these events. They are absolutely fascinating. Hopefully your concerns about the finances have been allayed somewhat. I have to say, when I looked at the figures, of course, but it was a case for detailed discussion. So hopefully your concerns are allayed and we can move forward with supporting this project.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Well, City Executive Board recommends Council to increase the overall capital budget and to note the increase in the revenue budget, which will be raised during the forthcoming budget setting process. Can I see those in favour, please? Thank you very much. Right, now we move on to item 8, the extension of the contract, Interim Chief Executive. Right, and Councillor Price,
thank you,
Lord
Lord
recommendations.
Yes, as colleagues will remember, we moved very quickly after the decision by Peter Sloman to move to Reading to appoint an interim chief executive, and after a fairly exhaustive process, we identified Gordon as a suitable candidate, and he has proved extremely successful in the period of a few months he's been with us in a number of very important respects. And we were delighted when he said he would be able to consider an extension of his contract to 2020. We went through the Appointments Committee and we recommend it to Council.
Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Simmons.
This doesn't sound very good to me, and we've had a discussion about it. There's no reflection at all on Gordon's abilities, and I feel slightly uncomfortable talking about this in front of other senior officers. But if I was a senior officer in this organisation, and there was an interim position up for grabs for chief executive, and it was awarded, and it's fine, it was an interim position, and then suddenly it was extended without re-advertising that job, I would feel quite awkward, because that was essentially my career capped for 3 years, because I wasn't that job which I could have potentially applied for, and would under normal circumstances apply for, is no longer open to me because a contract's been extended without proper re-advertising process. Now, it would be very different if the post was re-advertised as a longer-term 3-year extension, because that's certainly not an interim role. 3.5 years is not an interim role by any means. So if it was re-advertised for a 3-year post, with however that was, or a permanent post, I think that would be absolutely fine. That would be a normal process. And I'm looking for Bob, who was of course in HR. Why this is what I would see as a quite normal process not being followed, and why we're just extending a contract rather than re-advertising the post.
I do note that we ought to have a seconder for this recommendation. Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments before Councillor Price sums up? No?
Well, Lord Mayor, as colleagues will know, in every case where there is a senior appointment to make, we consider the various alternatives. And the circumstances which obtained when Peter was decided to leave have not changed substantially, and that's laid out in the report in some detail in paragraphs, whatever it is, paragraph 5. And from a point of view of the field in which we thought we would be able to advertise, it would have created a period of uncertainty at a time when we didn't want uncertainty. So given that Gordon had been successful in establishing himself within the Oxfordshire Chief Executives group, had done a very successful job in terms of the relationships with the DCLG and the and BIS in relation to the growth fund growth deal, we felt that there was a strong case for maintaining the contract. And on that basis is what we recommended, because a 3-year period gives him the chance to move to the city and to actually locate himself here.
Thank you. I mean, we are recommended to agree the recommendations of the Appointments Committee for a 3-year extension and consider the attached Equalities Impact Assessment and Risk Register in reaching our decision. Can I see those in favour, please? Thank you. And those against? Abstain? Thank you. Must have thought we were going to spend a long time discussing it. Welcome back, Gordon. We now have been reappointed until 2020, end of. So, thank you. Right, and we move on to the questions on notice from members. Do we not? Hang on, what have I missed out? Oh, those! Oh, goodness me, we better have those, haven't we? Right, please, somebody have some questions on the 16th of October then. Fast. No? Councillor Brandt, thank you.
Not so much a question, just to say thank you to the CEB for approving the International Women's Day flag flying on the town hall.
Thank you for that. Any other comments, questions on those minutes? No. We really can get on to the questions on notice. The first one was from Councillor Simmons to Councillor Tanner on single-use plastics. And do you have a supplementary, Councillor Simmons? Councillor Wade to Councillor Tanner on bicycles.
I'm a member of the council store, which is one of our residents. Could you have a microphone, please? Fine. One of my residents was told by a member of the council staff that they now have a large heap of our damaged bikes waiting for something to be done with them. Could the board member find out whether this is a real or an imaginary pile? I'm told it's real, and that the council is looking after this pile of bikes, spotless bikes.
Lord Mayor, I wonder if you would admit it, whether Councillor Louise Upton can answer this question. She's a lot more au fait with what's happening with these hire bikes than I am, and if that's permitted. I mean, I'm happy to answer it if it's not, but if it's permitted, I'd be grateful if we could hear Louise Upton.
Can we perhaps delegate from Councillor Tanner to Councillor Upton for this very specialist answer, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I can confirm collecting any of these bicycles at all. Part of the code of conduct that I took part in writing over the summer insisted that each bicycle has very clear details on it about how to contact the company that has provided this bicycle. They all have to have teams on the ground, and they do, who will go and contact bicycles if they're left in the wrong place. So occasionally a complaint has come through to the council, but it is always referred straight on to the company and they're collecting them. So as I understand it, we don't have a single one. We have never picked up a single one.
Thank you. Councillor Wade, Councillor Tanner again, about doctor's bikes again. From Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Tanner on air quality.
I don't know something to do with that.
Councillor Wade to Councillor Tanner again, more air quality.
A very brief supplementary. We don't have a diffusion tube in the high street. It would be good to have one at the end of the high street in Carfax where the buses are now parked. Would it be possible to set one up fairly quickly?
My recollection, Lord Mayor, is that we do have a diffusion tube in the high street. I'm very surprised if we don't, because we do have figures on the pollution levels in the high street. So I don't. Perhaps this list is not as full as it might be, but I can check that and let the council.
Thank you. Question 6 from Councillor Wilkinson to Councillor Tanner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I can assure you Councillor Wade does know well something. We should probably give you a history of it, actually. Thank you for this answer, the obvious question, really. What are we doing about replacing all the diesels? As I understand that the range of the electric vehicles may be less than claimed.
Lord Mayor, we are committed to changing our vehicles as they come up for renewal, and obviously we will consider how much we need a hybrid or an electric or an alternative, or whether only a diesel is available. And one of the things that will affect that decision is what stage we're at in the progressive zero emission zone, which, as councillors will know, starts from 2020, covering quite a small area, and then spreads out 25 and 30. So the first thing that's going to hit the city council is that we're going to have to find refuse lorries, which can go into the zero emission zone from 2020. We are still working on that problem.
Thank you. Question 7, Councillor Brandt to Councillor Tanner. Continuing review.
And thank you, John, for your answer. Just a clarification question, just because I'm worried that the council ends up financing private profit with our public funds. So is the additional full-time equivalent, was that in place because of in previous budgets? Is that why there's no increase, or is it just absorbed by other work that other officers are doing?
We are, I can't remember what I said to you now. Yes, I'd like to know what position I'm trying to defend. Lord Mayor, we are introducing extra staff because of the Barton development, and that will increase the number of roads and the number of people that we have to clean up after. But as far as the centre of town is concerned, the management and staff have behaved extremely well and are now all working on new shifts which were introduced in October at no extra cost to the council. I think the only extra cost is for extra cleaning of toilets, because the toilets are open. And so instead of us cleaning from about 7 o'clock in the morning, we're cleaning from about 5 o'clock in the morning. And I think that, I hope that will deal with the mess created by the nighttime economy. It really is a remarkable example of authority behaving in a more efficient way at no extra cost to the taxpayer and making the centre of Oxford even cleaner than it is now. And I think that I would like to take this opportunity to commend the staff who do the cleaning of the toilets and the streets for their flexibility and cooperation in working these new shifts. I understand they are popular with some people because they are working 4 days a week rather than 5. But it's a rolling shift system so that you won't work the same day all the time. As as far as the suburbs are concerned, we're continuing as much as we have before, so that if some staff don't find the new shift pattern acceptable or easy to work around childcare and all the rest of it, then they can carry on working in the suburbs. But it does seem to be working extremely well. I share the surprise that we could somehow do an even better job for the same amount of money, but that's what we're doing, and all credit to our staff.
Question 8, Councillor Simmons, on similar.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, interested in that answer. I'm glad you said 4 staff, Councillor Tanner, because I was told 28, so that's a great reassurance to me. Please could the new organisation chart show responsibilities be sent to members, because I know there's a new head of street scene, isn't there, and there are area managers, and I think that'd be really helpful for people to know.
I will ask for that responsibility chart to be sent to Council.
Thank you. Question 9, Councillor Wilkinson to Councillor Tanner again, on the spotless Oxford scheme.
Yes, I meant to mug up on this before I ask this question. Yes, thank you, Councillor Tanner. I'm interested in the Oxford Civic Society's scheme. What role do they have and what role do we have? Do we work in partnership on Spotless Oxford? Because I know they've got a website up that they sponsor for this. I know this because there aren't many people subscribing to the scheme from Headington.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I'm now confused. Am I answering a supplementary question 9?
Yes. I hope so.
What's it got to do with the Oxford Civic Society? Could the member be allowed to clarify?
I can. Shall I talk to you outside the meeting about it? Because I've got information from the Oxford Civic Society about something that's exactly the same title.
Slight confusion here. If you can sort it out outside the meeting, that'd be great.
I'm happy to talk great things about Oxford if people want to. I doubt the members would like that. But if she tells me anything interesting, I'll pass it down the company.
Look forward to that. We get on to question 10, which is from Councillor Gollard to Councillor Tanner on glyphosate.
Yes, please. Supplementary, thanks for your answer, Councillor. You acknowledge, and I wouldn't pretend to understand the science, that there's an ongoing debate concerning glyphosate, and as a result of that, as again you mentioned, Meadow Prospect, one of the streets in Laurel Good, has on the most recent treatment not been treated. I suppose the question would be, what would be the mechanism if there were public support for this for other streets, Laurel Good or anywhere else, opting out, so to speak?
I'm unclear what that mechanism would be, Lord Mayor. We're keeping a close eye on what the scientists are telling us about the glyphosate, the Roundup, and if there were any threat, it would be to our own staff, and it's likely, which is why we apply it with a long rod and a droplet at the end. But there isn't any threat to the public or to other or to animals. Of course, it is very deadly to weeds. As a noloty, I'm very pleased about it. So we will keep up with the scientific research. We won't be doing a poll, an opinion poll of local people as to whether or not they think it's a good idea. I think that's our job in this council to decide whether it's a good idea. At the moment, I am convinced that this is a safe and effective procedure, and we will continue using it until we are shown that that's not, even when we are shown that's not the case.
That points about old villages representation officers or something like that.
Thank you. Again, you may have another conversation outside that. Question 11 from Councillor Wilkinson to Councillor Hayes on enforcement action on cyclists in Cornmarket.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you, Tom, for this. I think some residents would be disappointed that no FPNs have been given out for cycling during those times. Are there any plans to introduce this for repeat offenders?
So one of the reasons why there's been no FPNs served is that the FPNs are served for continuation of antisocial behaviour. And in the answer that I've given you, there are reasons why antisocial behaviour doesn't continue to that point. I think it's also worth saying that there's been various things the council has been doing, such as proactive messaging to students in order that they don't engage in some of these antisocial behaviours. I know that Louise, as part of her cycling work, for instance, has been calling for a refresh of the cycle signage, and that's something that we're taking forward. And when I was on scrutiny, I think the final CEB meeting that we sent recommendations to was around the council having more targeted operations, and CEB committed in May to doing that, and that's something that I know Rich Adams is taking forward.
Thank you. Question 12. Councillor Wade to Councillor Hayes on taxi rank.
Thank you very much for your response, Councillor Hayes. I was just wondering how taxis pulled up on the east side of Corn Market waiting to go over into the west side, how that's going to be policed so it doesn't happen. Have we got enforcement officers to do that?
I think on that, it's probably fair to say that we are meeting with the County Council on Thursday to have a bit of a discussion about how their emergency approach is going. We've got a position on that, which is based on the fact that we're paying for additional stewards on weekends to basically make sure that public safety is supported. It's not in our interest to keep on doing that. So we're looking forward to what the outcomes of the conversations are on Thursday.
Thank you. Question 13, Councillor Wolfe on temporary cycle ramp at Westgate.
Thank you very much. On question 22, Councillor Holmesworth clarified, I think, one supplementary that I might have had, which was who was actually responsible. This was a replacement, as I understand, of temporary of cycle stands that have been removed temporarily. So I can see that it would be the county's responsibility. My supplementary would be, given that we observe City Council staff replacing those stands, and we're told that it's at the expense of the county. I'm glad to see that we're working in such collaboration with the county. Could it be confirmed that we'll be paid for that?
Yes. Thank you. Question 14 on the business rate income from Westgate from Councillor Simmons to Councillor Turner, who is not here. Councillor Brandt.
So, yeah, Councillor, thank you. And thanks, pass on, and thanks to Councillor Turner for the answer. I think it's a little bit circumspect because obviously it looks to me like there's a delay in when we can actually receive the business rates, and we won't get an interest on the amount in the interim time. So could you clarify exactly, maybe you can't say exactly, but when we would start to see some of the first business rate income coming in? Because it looks to me like it might be, you know, as late as March 2018, and it's not clear whether that's all properties or some properties. And since we're talking about £7 million potentially a business rate, or a maximum of that, and an interest on that amount, it could really start to rack up. And I think we need to sort of have some measures in place to stop that happening. So there's a question or two in there.
Not heard.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As I say in the outline response, actually, we are waiting for the valuation office actually to value the properties for rating. It is the valuation office that places them on the rating list, and at that point we can actually start billing for the income. So, as I outlined there, whilst they say that they will look at the top 5 properties, we are still waiting for that information, and the best they can give us is sort of by April 18. We will be able to start billing. So it's a bit difficult to calculate what loss of interest. We're not obliged under the law basically to charge any interest on backdated rates. And we're very much in the hands of the valuation office. I would just add actually we've had 3 meetings with them to date. We've got another one next week basically, and we're still pushing hard.
Thank you. Yes. It's a very unsatisfactory situation, which I'm clearly doing all your best to deal with. Question 15. Sorry.
One other comment is that the experience we're having is not very different from any other local authority. Valuation office, like many parts of the service, has been massively cut back, and they simply haven't got the personnel to deal with the range of cases that come into it, and how all we feel from the previous evaluation as well. It's a very unsatisfactory situation, which I think we accept it all as well.
Councillor Simmons to Councillor Turner again on the loss of business rate on council and properties. Question 15.
Yes, so I mean, just obviously here it's concerning the 2 properties with a rental income of near to £250,000 per annum that are vacant, potentially, possibly. No one can know for certain because of the Westgate. I'm just wondering what actions are in place to make sure those properties are being relet and whether there's any sense of what the market's like for these properties post Westgate, and whether or not we'll have to reconsider changing the rents, reducing rents.
Well, the properties concerned are not generally in the ownership of the council, so we have to work with the private sector and indeed with colleges, because they are often the landlords for the empty units. But my understanding, I haven't got the details to hand, although we have got them, is that all but one unit is actually either being actively in the process of being relet or has people actually looking at it. The one unit that's not included there is the next unit, which is a large unit, because work is going on there by Jesus College to look at the underlying aspects of the area for the redevelopment project which they're bringing forward. The other ones are being looked at.
Question 16, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Turner on the covered market.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Possibly this question might be devolved to Mary, I'm not sure, or to Councillor Carson. Thank you for the answer to Councillor Turner. Have the previous leaseholders indicated any reason why they vacated their units and didn't renegotiate?
On Hayman, the fishmongers, they had been saying for several months that they wanted to consolidate on their Osenmead site. So they originally said they were leaving, and then they said they were going to stay, and then in the end they decided to leave. And when they did leave, they left at relatively short notice, which is very disappointing, because had we had more notice, we could have got somebody else in there before Christmas. So it's difficult, but I know that Jane Winfield and Elaine Phillip have been pulling out all the stops to make sure that we've got a worthy food-based tenant in there as soon as possible, but sadly it won't be before Christmas. Helen Douglas House, I think that was largely stemming from more general financial problems that the charity had been having. And I don't know a lot about CH Brown. I'm in the market fairly regularly. I talk to the tenants, and the response that I have been getting is that footfall has been good and has been up, and actually they haven't seen any fall off at all. One of the tenants said to me the other day, there was one day when the market was quiet, but he said at the same time Westgate was quiet, and when Westgate's been busy, the market has been. Corn Market seems to be as crowded as ever, so I think that the evidence on footfall is accurate. With a few empty units in the market, it's disappointing at the moment, but we're confident that we will get suitable tenants, food-led businesses where appropriate as soon as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Wade to Councillor Rowley on the Trailblazer Initiative.
Thank you for your reply. I've just got one supplementary question. The Universal Credit Emergency Fund, is this being widely publicised? And can we be told at a fairly early stage whether there is enough in the fund to satisfy the need that's going to be engendered by the other delay in university credit payments? Universal credit payments.
Thank you. I suspect the proof of pudding will be in eating, but as you know, there has been some good news on that, with the government having been persuaded by a lot of campaigning from various quarters to try to make it easier for people waiting for universal credits. You'll be aware that originally there was to be a 6-week waiting period during which the maximum a person can claim from the government's emergency payment was 50% of a benefit already calculated on the basis of the minimum a person would require to live on. And I think just about all the charities dealing with poverty and disability in this country have made the point very forcibly during that period, what are people supposed to eat? So there is some evidence of compromise from the government, and we will review provision on the basis of that. Needless to say, the council is determined to make sure that we don't have people losing their homes because of this policy.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson again on tree work, question 18.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Yes, question to Councillor Smith. Thank you for the figures, although they cover a different period to the one that I asked for. I was hoping to look at trends between April, October 16 and April, October 17. Do you think the way that assets are captured on the database is helpful in determining workload? Because I note that you say that an asset can be either an individual specimen or groups of trees where up to 200 could be present.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. I think it is the most efficient way of looking at our trees at the moment. I'd be happy to talk to you if the information you've been provided doesn't provide you, with the information that you feel you need. Be happy to look at that again. Just to say that it is taking longer than we would like at the moment to do the work to trees that we have identified as being necessary. And I would be absolutely delighted if proposals were to be forthcoming in a draft consultation budget to put more resources into this area.
Question 19, Councillor Goddard to Councillor Smith on Wolvercote play areas.
Thanks very much for the response. You mentioned that the equipment was installed in 2011. What's the rough, because I have literally no idea the answer to this, the rough amount of time which would usually lapse between either new equipment or refurbishment of equipment if it was starting to get a bit tired, on average across the city?
I'll need to look into that and send you a written response. I do know that all our play equipment is surveyed very regularly to make sure it's up to standard and safe for children to use. We're also nearing the end of a comprehensive programme to refurbish many of our play areas. You'll know that work is being done in Sunnymead, and there'll be work that will be carried out in the 5 Mile Drive play area as well, which I'm sure you'll be looking forward to.
Can I ask that all the extra information that people have promised actually is circulated to all members of council, please? That would be very helpful. Thank you. Question 20 before we break for tea from Councillor Goddard on 5 Mile Drive Pavilion.
Okay. Again, thanks for the response. Maybe my fault for asking a kind of quintuple-barreled question, but I don't see a direct response to the first, third and fourth parts of it. So I think it's worth asking again then, is the lack of pavilion facilities when they were promised back in 2013 unacceptable? Is the option currently being used unsatisfactory? And as a clue, my understanding is that the toilets mentioned in the response are not currently working properly. And further, I believe that the stakeholders have something to view on this, as we may see later. And will the council honour what was a clearly made commitment from 2013, which it's very difficult to see having been properly honoured so far?
Thank you. I mean, I'm sure we'll go into further detail about this when we receive the deputation later. The toilet situation and the storage situation is not adequate at the moment, and council officers and myself, are working with the club to come up with a satisfactory solution.
We should now break 6:30 on the dot. If we can be back by 7:10 at the latest, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Right. We will now move to the public addresses, which is agenda, whatever it is, 11 with any luck, I find it. Oh. Direct me to the page, okay. Where are we? No, it's item 11, thank you very much. Right, we have 5 addresses and a question from members of the public with a total of 45 minutes to be spread across, and hoping it will be enough. But we look forward to the first
speaker, who is Dr. Ramsey. Find it somewhere. Well, welcome. Please. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen amma ba'd. Honourable Member of the Oxford City Council, I greet you with the Islamic greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May peace and blessing of Almighty God be upon you all. I wrote, with reference to the ethnic cleansing and forced exodus of the hundreds of thousands of Rohingya people and the role of Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi, the Peace Prize winner and the de facto leader of Myanmar, in these atrocities. I would like to bring your attention to the worldwide criticism of the Ms. Suu Kyi for standing in support of Burma's military campaign of murder, rape and torture against the Rohingya minority Muslim group. I and millions of people in Oxford and across the UK believe that Ms. Suu Kyi has ignored her duty to humanity and peace and has failed to speak out against ethnic cleansing, rape and torture of innocent people whose only crime was to be a Muslim. Ms. Suu Kyi has decided to stand in silence whilst the people of Rohingya been killed, tortured and raped on her doorstep. Her only reaction has been to say this is fake news. She has failed to recognize the UN's United Nations description of the action against Rohingya as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. Standing silence in the face of the horrific act against the Rohingya people calls the people of Great Britain to question whether Ms. Suu Kyi deserves to hold the honor of freedom of many cities in the UK, including the city of Oxford. As one of the representatives of Muslims in Oxford and Oxfordshire, I would strongly endorse the Ms. Suu Kyi is stripped of any outstanding of honor title that she has received in Oxford or any other part of the country. I strongly believe the honourable member of the Oxford City Council will keep uphold the standard of Oxford City, one of the best academic, again I said one of the best academic city in the world, and maintain the highest possible standard of justice and fairness that Oxford City deserves. Finally, I would like to say that I and all Muslims and many others of Oxford are grateful and thankful of outcome of your decision. I believe justice has been done. Thank you all, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramsey. Thank you.
Somebody wants to question?
I think so. I don't see the question, but thank you very much for your address. Quite right. Yep. We have Gunnar Niels and Richard Lawrence Wilson. Please. There's the microphone. You're going to speak first, Gunnar? Yes. Please. You have 3 minutes, I think, or 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes speech. Good. You've got 5 between you. Yes?
Thank you. Thank you. So our request to the City Council is to build a permanent pavilion at 5 Mile Drive Recreation Ground to replace the one that was demolished a few years ago, and to support us meanwhile with a temporary porter cabin. This is vital for the club to continue to offer football to hundreds of girls and boys. Summertown Stars is the largest youth football club in Oxfordshire. We have around 750 players, a quarter of them girls. Some of them are on the gallery with us tonight. And over 15 teams from under 6 to adult football, plus a team for the visually impaired. A third of these teams in the younger age groups play at 5 Mile Drive. At Cutslow Park, our other home ground, where 2/3 of our teams play, the council and club successfully completed the bottom pavilion last year, an 800k project for which Summertown Stars had secured 600k thanks to our charter standard community club status. But at 5 Mile Drive, we are still without any proper facilities since the old pavilion was demolished a few years ago, and this is unacceptable. Around 250 girls and boys play at 5 Mile Drive every weekend, and the club cannot even provide the most basic facilities to players, visiting teams, and parents. We have had many complaints, and indeed a formal warning from the Oxford Male Girls League last month. Our needs are basic, but they are essential. A facility with 2 toilets, male and female, a small kitchen area and a small room to offer refreshments to players, parents and teams visiting from across the county, and separately a room or container for storage. The council provided a small temporary unit after the club last addressed the council here in February 2016, but this is not fit for purpose. We seek the support from the council for a new temporary solution involving a porter cabin paid for by the club and a container for storage. But the real long-term solution we are urging the council to provide is a new pavilion that can be shared with the local community and that provides the right facilities for the 250 girls and boys that play at 5 Mile Drive every weekend. Thank you.
I'm speaking on behalf of the community living around 5 Mile Drive. You just heard about the desperate need for toilets and facilities for the hundreds of girls and boys who play football there every week. The situation is really an absolute disgrace, and it shames us all. And local residents fully support the Summertown Stars request, but we are also desperate to see 5 Mile Drive Pavilion replaced with a building that includes a space for the community. There are about 480 families, 1,300 people of all ages within 500 metres of the pavilion, and we're hemmed in on 3 sides by major roads and on the 4th by the North Oxford Golf Club, which is a private facility. Apart from the recreation ground, we have no amenities at all. No pub, no community centre, no church, no school, and there's no local hub or meeting place. The pavilion was there for over 100 years, and community celebrations and meetings were held in it. It was our polling station, but it gradually became unsafe until only the toilets could be used, and then, as you've heard, it was demolished. In 2013, we were really delighted when the City Council announced a programme of 12 pavilions which were going to be improved, including 5 Mile Drive. Since then, all the others have been upgraded or replaced. Most recently, there's a lovely new pavilion in Headington Quarry, opened on the 27th of October, but our pavilion has just been demolished. To sum up, I would like to quote what Councillor Linda Smith, who we spoke to a little while ago, said when she opened the new Quarry Pavilion. She said, "By the way, it has a fantastic community space. This is something for the whole local community, not just footballers, and I hope to see lots of people using it for all sorts of activities, from birthday celebrations to group meetups." We recognise exactly what Councillor Smith had in mind. A survey of residents has shown overwhelming support for a pavilion with space for community activities. We desperately need a focus to tackle isolation and loneliness among older people and to get youngsters together. So we join Summertown Stars in asking the council to keep its promise keep its promise and replace the pavilion at 5 Mile Drive. Thank you very much.
Councillor Smith, do you wish to respond?
I do, yes, so first of all, thank you both for the address, and going to thank you for all the excellent work that Summertown Stars do, providing opportunities for girls, boys, men and women to get involved in football in our parks. It's very much appreciated, and I know you do an excellent job. As you said, we've worked very well in the past. We've been very successful working in partnership to invest money in the 2 pavilions in Cutslow Park. A total of £550,000 worth of council money went into those, and as you say, over £600,000 worth of external funds, which Summertown Stars were instrumental in obtaining. And I think the result is facilities there that we can all be proud of. So the two gentlemen raised 2 issues, I think, and I'd like to raise the points made by Mr. Lawrence Wilson first. On the need for community facilities, the council published its community centre strategy. We assessed the need for community facilities across the city, and the need in 5 Mile Drive doesn't support council expenditure in that area at the moment. There are the 2 pavilions we've already mentioned in Cutslow Park, which have got fantastic facilities, as well as the pavilion run by the North Oxford Association there. And there are facilities nearby in Cutslow, Wolvercote and Summertown, which serve the 5 Mile Drive area. Coming to the points raised by Mr. Neils and the Summertown Stars, on the issue of facilities to support people playing football on 5 Mile Drive Rec, you're really pushing an open door. We recognise the need for facilities there, for adequate toilets, for adequate storage, and I'm confident that we'll be able to find a way of providing those. There are a number of possible solutions that have been talked about. As you say, they could involve a porter cabin, they could involve a storage container, they could involve the camp store that we've discussed with you previously. So yes, you know, let's carry on talking. We've said we'll fix up a meeting. They'll try and get that fixed up for later this week. But I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will get there in the end, and you know, give 5 Mile Drive Rec the facilities you need to carry on doing an excellent job, getting our young people involved in football there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We then have Elise Benjamin coming. Elise, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. In November 2014, the West Area Planning Committee met to decide on the application for the new Westgate Shopping Centre. I was a member of that committee, and I remember a representative of Cyclox raising concerns about the provision of adequate cycle parking. Those concerns were shared by some members of the committee, myself included, as stated in the meeting minutes. It was agreed that details of cycle parking as conditions should be presented to the committee for discussion at a later stage to ensure that the concerns of Cyclox were addressed. The committee papers also included a response from the developers, the Westgate Alliance, supporting the council's aspiration to provide circa 1,000 cycle parking spaces close to the development site. The cycle parking conditions were finally discussed over 13 months later at another West Area Planning Committee in January 2016. At that meeting, it was minuted that the committee were concerned to ensure that the remaining spaces for the final discharge of Condition 21, providing 1,000 parking spaces, was secured. The committee wanted the Westgate Alliance to have further talks with the County Council and to engage with Cyclox to ensure that the conditioned number of cycle parking spaces were met. To be absolutely clear, Condition 21 of the Outline Planning Permission plainly stated that details of cycle parking had to be improved in writing within 12 months of the start of construction. Another key part of Condition 21 is that the cycle parking scheme, as approved, shall be available for use upon first occupation of the development and retained at all times thereafter. Anyone reading that condition would be justified in the belief that the cycle parking would be installed ready for use on the day the Westgate opened. But as we know, this is far from the case. Planning Condition 21 actually specifies 1,022 spaces in total and goes on to say the provision of cycle parking is a key element of the public realm and transport design for the Westgate development. In coordination with the City Council, County Council and the Westgate Oxford Alliance, they have identified a range of cycle parking locations at all the main approach routes to the Westgate development to ensure cyclists have safe, easy approach routes and locations to park their cycles. This is repeated in the Westgate developer's own public realm design report. Not only was there an assurance that cycle parking was to be part of the public realm of the new Westgate, but there was also an assurance that cyclists would have safe and easy approach routes and parking locations. So, last month we had the long-awaited opening of the new Westgate, with an expectation that cyclists would be welcome. But sadly, the reality was far from what was expected. Not only were there insufficient cycle spaces to comply with Condition 21, but the assertion that cycle parking is a key element of the public realm was a smokescreen for what is clearly an attempt to avoid cluttering the curtilage of a high-end shopping centre with bikes. How inconvenient for a shopping centre to have to accommodate cyclists when they want people to drive in so that they can buy more things. As a well-known local cycling blogger put it a few days after the Westgate opened, Westgate's website boasts of the 1,000 cycle parking spaces they have provided, and the Cycle Hub covered secure bike parking with a workshop run by Oxford's well-regarded Broken Spoke Cooperative. But wait, where are all these spaces? Where is the hub? Yes, when the Westgate opened, there was a blatant reference to their website of a local cycle co-op's apparent involvement in cycle provision at the shopping centre, adding to the cycle-friendly smokescreen. Well, I'm a member of the Broken Spoke board, and I can tell you that no such arrangement exists, which is probably why the Westgate Alliance took the page down a few days after the shopping centre opened. So back to what happened to the bike parking. Well, the Westgate Travel webpage has been changed. It now claims, if you come to Westgate by bike, you'll be able to park conveniently around the centre using our bicycle spaces in the vicinity of the Westgate. Indoor secure parking stands as well as outdoor parking is also available. The webpage then lists the locations where they have provided cycle spaces, 3 around the outside of the John Lewis building and 1 on Speedwell Street. That's a total of just 240 stands. If you deduct the 176 spaces lost from the front of the old Westgate and the 46 lost from the top end of St Ebbs, that means just 18 additional cycle spaces. And as for the hub, it's still not open, has no signage or information on the website to say when it will open, and is a mystery to staff at the Westgate Information Desk. As the chair of Cyclox recently put it in one of many newspaper articles, there are no cycle parking spaces in convenient locations, none at all. Overall, the storyline for cycling at New Westgate has been one of wholly inadequate parking, complete marginalisation. The Westgate car park was up and running in time for the opening, and the temporary council car park at Oxfens is still open. So it's clear that for the Westgate Alliance and the City Council administration, car parking takes priority over cycling provision. If you, as the political administration of this council, are genuinely serious about making Oxford zero emission in a couple of years, then you need to take action to prove that non-polluting modes of transport are important. You need to show us that actions speak louder than words. You need to take action to prove to cyclists that you aren't simply sitting back and letting the Westgate ride roughshod over planning conditions. You need to take action to stop the current bike parking chaos around the Westgate, because the bike racks still aren't there. And I have a petition with over 2,000 signatures printed out earlier today. The signatures are still coming in. Thank you.
There is a written reply from Councillor Hollingsworth. I think that will presumably suffice for the moment then. Thank you. Right. We then have Chapel Archwell speaking. You have 5 minutes.
Elected councillors. Our council leader, Councillor Price, has used the media to ask the people of Oxford to comment on his plans for Oxford 2050. And this is to be welcomed. But I ask you, seeing that the City Council now is about to make serious major changes in the creation of the Oxford Direct Services, which is going to be a private arm, which is going to employ 700 council staff to be transferred over to it. Surely, I ask you now, shouldn't this also have been put to the people of Oxford seen that this is a major change in the relationship that the people of Oxford will have with the County Council, with the City Council. It will be a third layer, and for all those who are activists and try to consult with the City Council, you will know now that getting letters answered, even using FII information, is often tardy, inadequate, and really loathsome. So to have a third layer, which is going to be privatised, holding that to account is going to be very difficult. I ask you now, seriously, shouldn't the people of Oxford have been asked during the last local elections, why wasn't this part of the local elections? Why, if you're so brave and bold about this, did you not put it to the people of Oxford about this major change which is going to come and affect everyone in Oxford? You all heard the Chancellor last week. He said that he's approved the corridor between here and Oxford. It's going to mean very big infrastructure changes and so forth. So therefore, the City Council is going to be even more important because of all the housing that's going to be built. And yet, at the same time, we have a situation where the people of Oxford are not being given the chance to have a referendum on this major change. So here's what I'm asking now. It's within your powers, councillors. You're there to keep the people informed about what you're doing, just as you want to know what our views are on the way forward. Give the people of Oxford the chance to see, spell out to them the pros and the cons of creating this great big monstrosity, which one of the councillors referred to as a beast, and I quite rightly agree with him. Give it to the people of Oxford. Let them have a chance. Give them a referendum. Don't just ply it on them from nowhere. Let them have a referendum on this, because it's going to be a major change which further distances the people of Oxford's ability to hold the City Council to account. You say it's nonsense. You
don't interrupt, please.
Sorry.
Thank you. Now, you've already extended the CEO's office until 2020. The way the council's going by privatising everything, there's going to be little left for the man to do to earn these fantastic salaries. Come on, I ask you now. It's time. Give the people of Oxford a chance to, if you're so brave and bold about it, I'm going to stop here now. Give the people of Oxford a chance to have a referendum on this major change, because it's going to make holding the City Council to account even greater. Thank you.
Does the board member wish to respond? Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Sorry to be late rushing from work. Bob has asked me to reply, though. I think it's an area of shared executive responsibility. We're really clear this is not about privatisation. Of course it's not. The council is going to be the sole shareholder in this company. It's a wholly owned local company. The whole point, actually, is to enable us to continue to run frontline services, which is a real priority for us. So quite specifically, I can tell the council now, when I come along with a consultation budget, and I hope with sound consultation is adopted by this council in a few months, we will be talking about planning in additional trading income from our wholly owned company into frontline services that we value and we cherish. This council has a proud record of insourcing work, doing work for other organisations in the private sector, in the not-for-profit sector, and in the public sector in a range of areas. There's a limit to what you can legally do as a council in terms of insourcing. Ironically, there's much less limit on outsourcing. And so as a consequence, we're setting up this vehicle precisely to allow us to retain control over our services, which we will do as the primary shareholder, while at the same time bringing more work in. So it's actually, it's not any sort of privatisation, quite the reverse. It demonstrates our commitment to the values of public service, the values of direct delivery. That's why we're going to have our own local authority trading company. And I have to say, I think those values, the fact that we do want to do trading work in order to protect the front line, have been amply clear in my party's manifesto. I think they've also been shared, actually, to some degree by others in the chamber as well in recent local elections. I certainly wouldn't see the need for wasting local people's money on a referendum on that sort of thing.
Thank you. Now,
We have a question from Judith Harley. You'll have 3 minutes.
Lord Mayor, councillors, at the last full council on 2nd October, I asked a question about local plan policy SR2. I was disappointed that my question seemed so unclear that it was not answered, which is why I asked the same question again today, but phrased differently for clarification. I am asking about establishing criteria and the level of proof required that an open area provides sufficient important green space for local residents for planning permission to be denied. Policy SR2 states, planning permission will not be granted for development where the open area provides an important green space for local residents. It continues, where this is not the case, planning permission will only be granted where there is no need at all for the facility. In today's reply, Councillor Hollingsworth acknowledges that in the case of Cowley Marsh Depot, it was acknowledged that this space was important to those local residents who had written in. He continues, however, it is not the case that demonstrating that importance would automatically lead to the refusal of the planning application. I am surprised by this response, as the phrasing of SR2 appears to contradict that stance. SR2 begins, planning permission will not be granted for development. I understand that each planning application is judged on its own merits and that conflicting policies must be balanced against each other, but surely, if a policy begins with planning permission will not be granted for development and the corresponding criteria are satisfied, as appears to have been acknowledged in the case of the Cowley Marsh Depot application, then planning permission should not be granted. This is why I am asking about the evidence of proof required for an open area providing an important green space for local residents, sufficient to trigger the SR2 clause, planning permission will not be granted. Clearly, Councillor Hollingsworth will have to differ with local residents on this point of interpretation, as the response which I have received today implies that this part of SR2 is an empty phrase to be used in ticking boxes and justifying that it is being considered. We are still not sure what are the precise criteria for triggering this part of policy SR2. What precisely and exactly do we need to satisfy the requirements for you so that planning permission will not be granted for development? Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth, do you wish to add anything to your response?
Well, it's quite nice to have one's answer read out in the question, but I will have another go at explaining this to try and avoid us coming back round again. Planning decisions take place in a quasi-judicial process. So imagine it like a jury, for example, considering a court case. Each of those individual members of the jury has to come to their own decision on the facts, and that is the case when it comes to a planning decision. There will be an officer report, and that will be that officer's view, and it will be written on the basis of professional expertise and experience. But each of the individual members of the planning committee have to form their own opinion on the facts in front of them, the facts of the case, the weight of the policies. That is why we have planning committees. That is why planning committees quite often take majority decisions, because different members come to a different point of view on the same facts. That's the whole basis of the system as it has existed since 1947. So on that basis, it's impossible to answer the question. It's an ontological impossibility. You're asking me to say what every single future member of every single planning committee will always think, and that of course cannot be done. Each individual planning committee faced with a planning application must weigh up the evidence in front of them. There is no other way of doing it. That is the law.
Thank you. Now we'll go back to the questions from members with question 21. Have we anything else to say? Yeah, okay, sorry, we'll do the petition. Absolutely. Yes, Mr. Gibson has a petition for us.
Evening everyone. I'm going to highlight a few areas in the published address that you've got. I'll leave you to read the detail at your leisure. We're discussing this evening the Blue Hole, what's become known as the Blue Hole. Some of you have seen this before, I'll show it to you again. This is a map of Oxford showing the various leisure centres, public leisure centres. Right in the middle of the Blue Hole is where Temple Cally Pools used to be. It is of course no longer. And that's the deficit that we're asking you to do something about this evening in responding to the petition. It means that 40,000 people are now no longer able to walk or cycle in under 20 minutes to get their exercise and fitness. Why 20 minutes? It's been shown, national surveys of where people do close facilities like this, that if you have to travel for more than 20 minutes to get your exercise and fitness, you either don't go at all or you don't go as frequently. And that's been borne out with what's happened with Temple Cally Pools. 40,000 people, that's your statistician's number. 40,000 people no longer able to do this, quarter of the city's population. These centres aren't just populated by industrial swimmers already fit, but there's a whole range of people. These include parents with small children who walk with pushchairs. Used to be a shared family experience. It's now been turned into 2 expensive bus rides to get where they want to go and back again just for swimming. There are infirm people who can't travel far to carry out the only exercise they can to stop themselves getting worse. We had the story of the lady who pushed her husband in a wheelchair twice a week to get to TCP, just so she could be with him and help him swim. Then there's the elderly who swim, not because they necessarily want to, but to stay as mobile and fit as they can, to maintain their independence in society, and to prevent themselves from costing the NHS or having to be dependent on the NHS. Then there's groups of children who used to walk together down there. Anywhere else is too far, they're just not allowed to go there. They don't want to anyway. No longer can they do that. There's the local Muslim community who value the women's only sessions that started at Temple Cally Pools and carried on for many years. Then of course there's people recovering from accidents who want to get somewhere quickly and sensibly, easily for rehabilitation. People with mental health needs who need a routine and see swimming and exercising as something regular that supported them. And that's as well as the fitter amongst us, who'd use a local facility on the way to or from work or during lunchtimes. For all of these groups, their lives revolve to a greater or lesser extent around a local accessible leisure centre. This is no longer possible, and we know, because the Save Temple Cally Pools campaign carried out a survey, that very few of them go as frequently as before. Many go less frequently elsewhere because of cost and time. And a worrying number, particularly the elderly and the infirm, have not exercised since 2014. And all of these groups fully use Temple Cally Pools, particularly when it's properly maintained. So it's not as though they never had a local leisure centre. You have actively and knowingly removed this from them. Yes. So, a replacement is needed. I look forward to the debate and to hearing how you propose to replace Temple Cally Pools. Thank you.
Councillor Smith, will you respond now?
Thank you for the petition, Mr Gibson, and I understand why some residents may have signed it. Temple Cally Pools served the city well for many years, and many residents will have fond memories of time spent there. However, I don't accept that there is a significant unmet demand for leisure facilities, including swimming pools, in this city. Needs analysis undertaken in 2013 and 2014 showed that the city is very well served with community accessible swimming pools. And this will continue to be the case in the future, according to Sport England, who have used their facility planning model to test supply against predicted demand in Oxford until 2025. As you know, in 2014 we opened the fabulous new pool at Blackbird Leys Leisure Centre. It's a 25-metre pool with a movable floor, a separate teaching pool, a toddler splash pool, a sauna, all the latest gym and fitness equipment, soft play, creche and a cafe, and an extensive programme of exercise classes. It's been a huge success with more than 1.25 million visits since it opened. Quite simply, there is no blue hole. Since 2014, this council has invested £500,000 in the community accessible sports facilities at the Spires Academy. We've opened a gym in the Rose Hill Community Centre. We've got a community agreement in place with the Oxford University Pool on the Iffley Road. And I would rather people use the council facilities, of course, but we can't pretend that the private facilities don't exist. And there are a range of private operators out there catering for people with various different budgets. Many former users of Temple County Pool have started using the Leeds Pool and Leisure Centre. I've been on Google Maps, I'm a keen geographer at heart. It's 7 minutes away from the site of the former Temple County Pool by car, 13 minutes by bus, or 10 minutes by bike. The new pool in Blackford Leys is an excellent replacement for Temple County Pools, and I move that we note this petition.
We are entitled to have a short debate if we wish to. Does anyone wish to contribute to that debate? Councillor Simmons.
I think we've heard a number of representations about Temple County Pool over the years, and I think that shows the strength of feeling there is for that loss of facility. And obviously it was my local pool as well, and of course it was 10 minutes further to get to Blackford Leys, not just I had to get to Temple County Pool, it's already 10 minutes. Then I do 10 minutes, it's 20 minutes. So it's not as if it's always, obviously the distance between the two pools is not always what we're measuring.
Yes.
And I think it would be really quite easy to settle this matter, is to actually do surveys of previous users of the pool and find out whether there's been a decline in them. Because clearly, I think Councillor Smith is correct. If you look at the statistics citywide, we've got quite a lot of swimming pools, with the public facilities and the private. But it's just that it's where they are is the issue. And I think certainly we've got good facilities and those have increased people attending them, and we can see those statistics. What we don't know is whether or not there's a left behind group, people who are not going, who previously did because of the location through whatever reasons, concerns over their access, or concerns over the cost of the travel, or not having a car, or an inability to cycle. So I think that's really what we need, is actually some hard evidence, because obviously you were saying, there isn't sort of evidence for it, but I've not seen any surveys done by the city, and I don't think they've been done to see what that group, what that cohort of people is doing now. Because that's really what Mr. Gibson's saying, is there's a whole load of people who are not going who previously were. I've got nothing either way. What he's doing, he's done his own survey of his group, and it's come up with an answer. I'd like to see a survey done by the city and settle this once and for all.
Again.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Gibson, for bringing this matter back to Council. I'd just like to say that I think Craig makes a very good suggestion. I think it would be very useful for us to have an independent analysis of the need in that area. I think, Mr. Gibson's energy in collecting the views of his community is impressive. And he has clearly identified a lot of people who agree with him about the need. That is not, of course, the same as saying that we now here can decide whether we're going to build a new swimming pool. We can't. But I think in noting this petition, I would support Craig's idea of the council itself undertaking an analysis of the need that Mr. Gibson has identified.
We have a proposal to note the petition. I think I would like to see those in favour of noting it with the comments that have been made. It is just noting. It was just the proposal was from Councillor Smith was to note it, and that is what I thought we were voting on just now. So I asked you to vote on. Do you want to do it again? No? Right. So I think the petition is noted and some comments have been made, but that is where we are. Thank you, Mr. Gibson, for raising it again. Thank you. Thank you.
Coming back to finalists.
Let's have a look at that one. Question 21 we were about to do, from Councillor Wilkinson to Councillor Hollingsworth, on highways and parking.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth, for a very full answer. Can you tell us, I'm interested in the joint parking manager remit. Can you indicate whether or not the joint parking remit will cover the revision of existing but outdated CPZs?
The post is designed to look, as I think I've forgotten what I've written, so I'll just say what the post is doing. The post is designed to look at ways of integrating particularly the back office functions of the City and County Council's parking operations. So, for example, the County Council have just put in new parking machines. There's definitely some scope for procurement savings for both councils there. The City Councils use much more advanced technical approaches to identifying whether people have paid or not with the automatic number plate recognition. But there's also significant scope for bringing together the administrative and back office functions in order to drive savings for both authorities, and that's the primary purpose. The purpose is not to go and tinker around with lines, because that's essentially part of the existing functions. This is very specifically focused in on that. That's not to say that the conversations that I have with my counterpart and with county council and city council officers does not cover exactly the issues you are talking about. Clearly there is a need for investment in that area.
22 from Councillor Simmons, Councillor Hollingsworth on the Westgate cycle parking.
Yes, supplementary, which Alex, I don't think you covered in your comprehensive answer either to Elise Benjamin or just in this response, but thank you for the comprehensive response anyway. One point which came up, and I think it's a perception, but also it seems to have a ring of truth, is why does the council, it seems that they let big businesses get away with not meeting their planning conditions, and sort of riding roughshod over the council. If you're a big business, you've got a lot of money, you can do that. But I regularly deal, as many people do, with probably small traders, and where the city council seems to come down on them like a ton of bricks. So how can you, justify the fact that big business can go ahead without meeting its planning conditions, and seemingly no enforcement action or anything else is being taken?
Thank you very much. I understood that question. The point I would make here, that's an easy and cheap jibe, and it's completely untrue. First of all, the way in which a planning condition enforcement process works is if an applicant, small or large, domestic or retail, private or public, is in breach of their planning condition, or they fail to adhere to their planning condition, you don't immediately go to court. There are a whole series of steps that you need to go through in order to start the enforcement process. Most of that revolves around an individual conversation with that person, find out why it is that they've not adhered, and it'll only be at the very end of that process that you end up taking them to court. So the notion that you've got small businesses who are immediately taken to court without conversation or discussion or anything beforehand, I find implausible. If you have an example of that, I'd be grateful if you could share it with myself and with the officers. You can have a look at it. But in the case of the Westgate, it's quite clear that they're not in compliance with this particular condition. Everybody's aware of that. My answer says that they're not in compliance with it. And I've explained both why they're not in compliance with it. In several instances, it's because, taking them one at a time, the residential cycle parking isn't open if there aren't any residents to use it. So that's it is now complete. I went to look on Friday night. It appears to be completely ready to use. The hub apparently should be operational this week if what I was told last Wednesday when I wrote this answer is true. We will see, but you can see it's all ready to go. It's just the electronic fob system to unlock the thing was being tested, ready for implementation. But there's clearly quite a large number of spaces in the public realm which are still to be installed. But as I said in the answer, you can't install a cycle parking space until there's a piece of pavement to install it on, and it's very clear that there are a number of bits of pavement that aren't finished yet. So council officers have been working extremely closely on literally a daily basis with the Westgate to identify sites for cycle parking and to get them in, along with all the other conditions which they need to comply with. And if in the end the Westgate do not comply with them, then we will take the appropriate legal action. On the basis of what I've been told, what my answer says, the Westgate will not just comply, they will go beyond what it is that they need to comply with, and they will do it as soon as possible. But I think to suggest that officers are in some way beholden to wealthy applicants, I think does a huge disservice to the professionalism of those individuals. I think you should not say that.
Councillor Hollingsworth. Thank you. Question 23, Councillor Simmons on Seacourt Park and Ride. Councillor Wade to Councillor Hollingsworth from Oxford Futures.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's a question about the Oxford Civic Society and their recommendation that they have actually been engaged to a development forum. Sorry. Could you tell us how far this development forum has gone? Because it's obviously going to be of great interest, not just to the Civic Society, but to neighbourhood forum members and the public as a whole.
Yes, I think I covered this in the answer, so I'll probably just repeat what I've already said. The report, which was written by and for the Civic Society, called for a development forum. The City Council has a number of fora with which it engages people over planning issues, and the Civic Society, of course, also engages broadly with the public in promoting its own vision of how the city should expand, which is laid out in some detail in the report back in 2014, or whenever it was published. Of course, it's based, that particular report, essentially it's taking the Wilson Prize-winning entry by Urbed and taking it from a fictitious Oxford to a real Oxford, which, if you'd looked closely at the Wilson Prize-winning entry, didn't take a great deal of change, since it essentially was Oxford tipped 90 degrees on its side. It is a very good report. It has many excellent recommendations beyond these 8, and I'm delighted that my Liberal Democrat colleagues are now endorsing them, since they call for exactly the kind of development along transport corridors that their local MP is opposing.
Could we move on to question 25? Councillor Wade, Councillor Hollingsworth, pavement and curbstones damage.
Yes, right.
No. Sorry, Councillor Wade, did you want?
Yeah, I apologise.
Yeah, I think. Well, on 25.
On 25.
Good.
Yeah. Which again is for Councillor Hollingsworth. I can see what Councillor Hollingsworth is saying, that it's up to the ward councillor every time there's a problem with damage to paving and pavements, that the ward councillor, which could be me, have to raise their concerns with the highway authority. This is going to be an extremely hit and miss thing, to be honest. I can't go around the streets looking for damage to the curb, then contacting the highway authority. There has to be a simpler way of doing this, and I'm asking the board member if you can think of a way that we can streamline this process so that it actually works. At the moment, a lot of our pavements are in really bad condition.
Yeah, I think we had a similar question on this last time. I quite agree with you. I mean, I think there is a real problem, and developers do tend to leave pavements in a condition not like the one in which they found them. Your specific question here was, can we use planning conditions? And the very specific answer is that we can't. I will talk to the planning officers and see if we can include something either in any planning application inspections or as part of any building control inspections, but of course that's an informal process. It will simply be an eyes and ears. But we successfully do that. So, for example, the street scene team are eyes and ears for our antisocial behaviour team, and they're actually eyes and ears for the police. So I think it's perfectly possible to do that. But it can't be a guarantee. It can't be for ward members to simply kind of absolve responsibility for this kind of issues. So I think we're talking about belt braces and something else approach here. Use your county council, Councillor Howson would be probably for you. I'm sure very good at raising these sorts of issues, but I think we will try and need to identify as many routes as possible to flag these issues and ask the county council to use the powers that they have to ensure that pavements, curbstones and the like are repaired and replaced in the way they should be.
Thank you. time is getting on. We've got an hour's worth of motions to cope with, and we've got another 8 questions. Can I suggest that people are as brief as they can be in their supplementaries and their answers? Thank you. Councillor Ganton, 26, about Barkham Park.
Well, I'll spare Councillor Hollingsworth a supplementary since he's been working very hard this evening, but just to thank him for telling me what he thinks I was asking, in the same way that he's just told Council what our local MP says, and to know that in both cases he's wrong.
Can we move on to Councillor?
I believe that was a supplementary, so I'm going to answer it. Let me be abundantly clear. The Area Action Plan was the document which set the policy for 40% social housing and 60% market housing. I've looked in the records. Unfortunately, they're not entirely clear on this, but as far as I can tell, Councillor Ganson and his party supported that policy. If he'd opposed it, perhaps they should have opposed it at the time rather than supporting it. I'd certainly struggle to see how Councillor Moran's opposition to any development north of Oxford in any way can be described as being other than what I just said it was, which is opposition to development on transport corridors.
Stick to the council questions, possibly. Deal with councillors and council things. We will move on to question 27, Councillor Wilkinson, on buses in Queen Street.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Just a quick one. Thanks, Councillor Hollingsworth. Are you minded to exert your considerable influence with the county to try and address this safety issue?
I will raise it with them when I see them on Thursday. At the moment, I would say I'm probably minded to see the disbenefits more than the benefits at the moment.
Thank you. Question 28, Councillor Brandt on flood channel.
No supplementary in that.
Thank you. Question 29 on the impact of Westgate Centre.
Thank you for that answer. And obviously, I think we can't see quite the impact yet. I was asking when we might have a more detailed picture of it, because Westgate is just open and there's a lot of excitement around it. I am wondering, though, if there is any way to reconcile the fact that we are told on the one hand that there's no increase in, or no expected increase in air pollution, while we do seem to see an increase in footfall, and obviously and continuous cuts to buses and services, and so I'm just wondering how we manage to get all these people in without causing any transport issues or air pollution.
Well, it's an interesting question, Lord Mayor. The opening day of Westgate, we're told, there were 100,000 people in Westgate at various times of the course of the day. 6% of the parking spaces in the underground car park were occupied. And as you know, the campaign to get people to use park and ride, use buses, cycles, walkers, was very extensive. There's still lots of signs up saying for Westgate, use park and ride all around the city centre and the ring road. And it obviously was very successful. And I think that the answer to the question is that people are using park and ride, people are using buses, they are using trains, and they are not in that way contributing to a significant change in the pattern of traffic. There's been no additional congestion because of Westgate, and I think that's something which will be very interesting to be tested over Christmas. As Councillor Brandt makes very clear, and she's right, the period after Christmas is in a sense a kind of phony war, because of course you get increased numbers shopping for Christmas. The real test is going to be after Christmas, and that's going to be very interesting. Our football figures will be on a monthly basis, which will happen to the channel.
Thank you. Question 30, Councillor Gant to Councillor Price.
No supplementary, thank you for our help.
Thank you. Question 31 on Oxford to Cambridge Growth Corridor from Councillor Simmons to Councillor Price.
No supplementary, thank you.
2, the boundary review question to Councillor Price from Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. No supplementary. I'm not sure there's any point to asking around here.
Right, question 33, Councillor Gant to Councillor Price, think tank.
Out of respect for your strictures, Lord Mayor, no supplementary.
Give question 34 on Oxford and Cambridge Universities, presumably, to Councillor Simmons.
Well, no supplementary. Thank you for your answer.
Right, now we move on to motions, I think. Is that right this time? We've got two more things to do, I'm told. Goodness. What am I failing to do? Oh yes, those reports that we don't have, yes? Oh, hang on. I'll find my clear. Right. Yes, we have indeed the Outside Organisation Committee Chair report, no partnership report, nothing else notified. Fine, thank you. But we do have the Scrutiny Committee report. I'm really sorry to overlook that. So, Councillor Gant to present the report, and Council is invited to comment on and note the report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll just be extremely brief. Just to note, to draw Council's attention to changes in officer arrangements flowing from Andrew Brown's appointment to succeed Pat, and to thank him and John Mitchell very much for their customary efficiency in covering the gap, and I understand that the arrangements for his replacement will be made soon. Just also to draw Council's attention to the recommendation tracker on page 83 and following of your agenda, a gratifying number of yeses and agrees there, which I think testifies to the input that Scrutiny is having, and my thanks to all those who contributed to that process.
Any questions, comments for Councillor Gant? Oh, thank you. Well, now we can move on to those motions then. Councillor Wade, I think you are presenting a motion on tourism.
Yes, I should start by saying that I have seconded many amendments which have been attached to this motion by Councillor Clarkson. For Liberal Democrats, the important thing is that this motion is passed as soon as possible. The city cannot wait, and therefore I'm prepared to accept the amendments. I will speak very briefly because I'm aware it's 8:20 already. We have a world famous city. It's also a very small city. There are 161,000 of us at the last count. In 2016, which is the last year for which we've got figures, we had 7 million tourists, which is 43 tourists per resident. We are becoming a tourist-saturated city. So I've been asking this council to consider calling for CEB to look at a couple of ideas, which I hope they will take on board. One is liaising externally with other tourist cities and boroughs, sharing experiences and ideas, hopefully with a view to combining to push the government into legislation which will enable us to raise a tourist levy. My preferred way of doing this would be a bed levy. We have 4.8 million tourist bed nights in Oxford, which the pound a night would be nearly £5 million to help with street cleaning, management of the centre of the city, which is where the tourists want to be. We can make it better than it is now. You might say, in reply to this, that Oxfordshire makes £832 million per annum out of tourism. Why do I want to raise more? Because that money goes on accommodation, travel, food and drink, entertainment and shopping. A lot of it goes into the city and goes straight out to multinationals. I want money to come directly to the City Council so that we can spend it on improvements which will benefit tourists and residents alike. The second point that I'd like the CEB to consider is liaison internally. We have a lot of organisations involved with the tourist industry in one way or another. I'd like to see an umbrella organisation putting all their ideas together into a coherent strategy and facilitating communication between government and our tourist industry. A suggestion has been made to me that what we need is a destination management plan, which sounds like words without substance. But it could be the beginning of something quite serious. It could be a way that we could bring together all the various people involved. We would need stakeholder sponsors, including the City Council, and this could be an excellent way forward. It needs looking at. Thirdly, better coach parking arrangements and group management in the city centre. Currently, a number of city streets, and in particular the south end of St Giles, which is a wonderful entrance to the old city, is used as a coach park, which is dangerous for cyclists, especially timid ones like me. They have to cycle around coaches that are blocking the cycle lanes, and also because they run their engines while stationary. The air quality in St Giles must be badly affected. I'd like to see diffusion tubes put up outside the Taylorian. So, one final thing. I've received emails suggesting I wanted to discourage tourists. I want them to have a better experience of our city. 5 years ago, I wrote a book for child tourists because I didn't think they were having much fun. I just happened to have a few copies available. Free to any councillors with children or grandchildren. Just ask me for one and I'm happy to hand it over. Thank you.
A seconder, Councillor Brandt.
I'd like to second this motion. I commend it to members for their support, as it will principally join up many disparate elements that make up the sort of tourism offer that Oxford has. I mean, it will principally benefit, it's an attempt to make a better use of the tourist facility for the residents themselves, so they share in sort of the wealth that's generated to the city, and it isn't just simply cycled off to large property holders and tourist operators. Secondly, I think it will also lead to a better development of the many things that make up tourism, so that these are funneled in a way that is pro the citizens. And thirdly, I think also it will lead to a better tourist experience, whereby people have an enjoyable time and spares them from being exploited by unscrupulous operators who simply want to take their money without any respect for the city. So I commend it to you. Thank you very much.
Price and then Councillor Simmons.
We set up Experience Oxfordshire, which is a destination management organisation, 5 years ago. It was spun out of the City Council now as an independent body. It is supported heavily by the private sector in this city and in the county, and it does provide exactly the kind of forum that Councillor Wade seems to be looking at. The Chief Executive of Experience Oxfordshire is an experienced tourism expert and sits on the National Council for the tourism industry and is very well connected indeed with that sector. So far as the city itself is concerned, we have something like, as she says, 7 million visitors, and the distribution of the income from that is about a third of it goes into the retail sector, about another third goes into catering, and about 20% into accommodation. So it is feeding the local economy very successfully, in particular in terms of jobs. The number of jobs dependent on tourism is estimated at between 11 and 12,000, which is a non-trivial sum of in the workforce here. So I think it's important that we do actually embrace tourism and use Experience Oxfordshire in the way in which it's meant to be. But obviously, the issues that it has raised in recent times, particularly the ones that Councillor Wade mentions, coach parking and the congestion on the streets, are ones which need to be managed, otherwise we shall end up in the same kind of position as you've seen in Venice, Barcelona, elsewhere, where there's significant reaction against it. We sought to get a tourist tax as part of the city deal back in 2011-12, and were told quite bluntly, immediately, we submitted our bid to get lost because it was an added burden on business and therefore would be unacceptable to the current government. So I think it's a vain hope, but of course we can always keep plugging away because they change their minds on so many things that they may well change their mind on this one. And it is worth making the point that the impact on the city's own finances of tourism is huge in terms of refuse collection, in terms of cleanliness, and in terms, of course, of the pollution aspects, which Councillor Wade mentioned. So it's worth plugging away at, but I wouldn't expect any significant reaction very quickly. Last point I'd make is that so far as the impact of coaches are concerned, it's something which we are seeking to talk to the County Council about as part of our general review of transport in the city centre, which is the study which is being done for us currently and which will be reported on before Christmas for the local plan and its implications for that. So we will be looking at the coach parking and coach drop-off situation as part of that particular process, and then dependent on that will also be advice to tourist companies on where to avoid large groups walking at the same time and crowding out people from narrow pavements. It can only be advice, we can't instruct people to keep away from it, but it'll be an important part of the advice.
Councillor Simmons.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll be supporting this motion in the amended form, and I think we preferred the original, but it's fine in the amended form. I think it's 5 or 6 years ago, as Bob says, there was a lot of talk around the bed tax and tourist tax, and it even appeared briefly in the Green Budget, I remember, although Nigel only allowed it in at sort of, he's gone now, on a measly £80,000 a year, so I'm not sure where this several million comes from. But I think through some other mechanism, and I slightly disagree with Bob, I think obviously we know it benefits the Oxford economy, but not directly the city, and all these services which he said are things we have to provide, for the good of the city, to make the city centre look nice, or make the traffic flow, or do all these, to have the proper, all these other things which we don't really get recompense for in any direct way. It's all very indirect to the economic benefit the city that might filter to us through business rates or something like that. So I do think we should be pushing this and continue to push it, because a lot of these other cities that I mentioned, you go there and the sort of entertainment almost comes to you. You walk around the streets and there's lots of things you can enjoy, and that's because there's more funding into tourism, and we are more constrained here, and we're not a Venice and we're not a Barcelona. We do have the St Giles Fair, we do have the Lights Festival, we do have other things, but actually if you go to some of these other cities, it's like that, many times greater. And so I think there is opportunity to invest more in the tourist experience in the city. We do need to look for other funding, and this is something which is worthwhile pursuing.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I very much welcome this motion, and particularly the proposal to work with other authorities in tourist cities towards working out a joint approach on a tourist levy. It's worth doing the work, because while in some cities a levy on beds, supposing we could ever get the government of the day to agree to it, would be most beneficial in Oxford, where the majority of tourist visitors are day trippers. A levy on coaches or parking might perhaps be better. Yes, I hope that we will be able to work with other authorities, that we will be able to lobby the government and perhaps future governments of a different political colour. I'll just conclude by saying it gave me a smile that Venice is mentioned, obviously a tourist city, in Councillor Wade's original motion. There in the Risorgimento, if I remember what I've read rightly, they had a slogan, "Lottiamo all'ultima polenta." We will fight to the last polenta, which I'm sure is what in the areas of Oxford most affected by tourists we will do.
The sort of last shish kebab or something. Councillor Hollingsworth.
I don't know how to follow that. Right, I wanted to pick up, and in supporting the motion as amended, pick up particularly and endorse what Councillor Wade said about the impact on St Giles and other parts of the city from tourist coach parking. And also to reflect on the fact that while we have 7 million visitors a year, and they do contribute to the economy, though as Craig says, some of that contribution is indirect, quite a substantial proportion of those tourists do not contribute anything to our economy at all. And particularly observation of those coaches in St Giles, we'll see people get off, walk, take a few pictures, Masters Memorial, maybe a college, and then they'll turn around and they'll get back on that bus and they'll either go to Blenheim, or they'll go to Stratford, or they'll go to Disabilities, depending on what their cultural interests are. And of course what that's contributed is absolutely nothing except congestion and pollution to the city. So I think it's really important that we, in promoting tourism, we promote quality over quantity. People who stay here, who stay in a hotel, who go out for a meal, who go to the theatre, who visit a number of our tourist attractions rather than just taking pictures of the outside of them. And it's with that in mind that the local plan third options consultation raised all of those issues. Now, I'm well aware it's an enormously dense document, and I'm sure that most members in here will have read every single word, but one or two might have omitted the occasional paragraph. So I just wanted to highlight the preferred options on tourist coaches. Our preferred option is to have them concentrated at convenient places that don't block the traffic. They do have access to the edge of the city, centre, but not to the entire, right into the heart of the city centre as they currently do. And what that is getting at is that we do need to remove those tourist coaches from St Giles. They are a blot and one of them, this country, not just this city, this country's most beautiful streets. And we need to move those. The university has a tourism policy which talks about an arc stretching from the university parks down through the museums, through Queen's Lane, down to Magdalen, and you can see the attraction of that as a series of tourist destinations. The two places where tourist coaches currently drop off are at no way anywhere near either end of that attractively and sensibly designed arc, and that's the kind of thing that we need to address here. So I would thoroughly endorse that, the motion as it currently stands, but in doing so I would urge members to engage with the development of those local plans from preferred options into detailed options. That is going to have an impact potentially on the North Oxford seats, because we need to look at where appropriate places for dropping off are, but there are far better places to drop off tourists than where they're currently being dropped off in St Giles.
Thank you. Councillor Clarkson, as it was your amendment, do you wish to say something?
Yes,
as
thank
the
you.
final speaker before we...
And thank you, Councillor Wade, for accepting the amendment. I just wanted to talk about the original motion had suggestion that we apply for UNESCO World Heritage status, and I would caution against this. One of the main things that UNESCO World Heritage status brings is far more tourists. And we need to ask whether that's really what we want. It seems to work where you have a neglected treasure in a developing country, which perhaps needs more tourists and is in danger of being damaged. The whole process, though, is designed for archaeological sites and not really for living, functioning cities. So there is a real danger, as Dresden found to its cost recently, where it had its World Heritage status withdrawn, where you try to do something, like build a bridge to join up two sides of a city, or you try to meet your housing needs, that you get people from all over the world actually having a say in how your city is developed. And you know, we don't say this very often about the need to take back control locally. I think we should ask whether we want people perhaps from Peru and Latvia and Canada making decisions about our development plans. I would say we probably don't. We complain about planning inspection in Bristol, but this is even further removed. So I think at the moment we should leave well alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. Councillor Wade, would you like to sum up?
I don't think I need to.
We are losing up quite a lot of time. Those in favour of the motion as amended, please.
We should move on to Councillor Simmons' motion on conversion of
Buses into homeless accommodation.
Thank you very much. I know it's getting late, but I hope that you will listen carefully to this. I think it's an important motion. I mean, earlier this evening we approved an extra £1 million funding for a museum project, along with a £30,000 ongoing cost increase. We were kindly invited by the Lord Mayor to share a glass of wine. We enjoyed a nice meal at taxpayers' expense, and we'll all return home, I trust, after this meeting with a roof over our heads. Now is the time to turn our attention to those less fortunate than us. After all, society is judged by how we treat those less fortunate members of society, and those as those in charge of public spending, we must judge ourselves by the same criteria. What we have here in Homes for All is a registered charity with an innovative idea to tackle one of Oxford's most pressing social problems, homelessness. They have a track record and a business plan which represents extremely good value for money. Converting second-hand buses into shelters has worked in Reading, and it can work in Oxford. It's been a difficult year for the council's relationship with rough sleepers. It has led, quite rightly, to a new conversation on the challenges around homelessness with the aim of refreshing our own strategy. 3 times this year, the homeless community have come to the Chamber demanding action to keep Lucy's Faithful House open for the winter, to provide a building they could renovate and occupy, to ask for an apology and insurance that they won't be fined for being forced to leave their belongings on the street. please don't turn them away a fourth time. This scheme offers excellent value for money. £20,000 is all that's being asked for. It equates to £2,000 per bed space. Bus will not only offer shelter, but will offer a route for some people to get off the streets for good. And the people it will help, those with no local connection, are currently falling through the net. We know from all the meetings I've attended about homelessness, from all the information I've gathered by speaking to homeless people, these are the very people that the council know needs more support. Yes, there are questions which are never to be asked about how provision will fit into our existing structure. Homes for All have already reached out to several organisations locally, where the bus will go, the level of ongoing support needed, but they're all matters which have been thought of and can be addressed and have been addressed in Reading. And this motion, you have to remember, is just about considering the funding request. It's not a decision of this council to make it. It's a decision of CEB to look at the funding request. There's no attempt to sidestep the normal checks and balances that we all rightly expect when we're spending public money. This is only £20,000. But if we move quickly, we can make a real difference this Christmas. And I urge you to support this motion and help with a single vote tonight to help 10 people get off the streets and into shelter where they can start to move on with their own lives. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor Brandt, seconding.
Yes, I'd like to second it, and I'd like to urge people to support this motion. And to do that, I'd like to use the words of Deborah Robson-Gray and her colleague Kim Marie Pleasby, who are here in the audience, who founded this charity, this organization. As Deborah says, as a vulnerable adult with a disability, I found myself with almost no support over a 9-month period in 2016. I feel passionately that no one should experience the same journey. That is why I started Homes for All. I was homeless here in Oxford, sent by West Oxfordshire. I was moved from pillar to post, sometimes daily, with often only a couple of hours' notice, not being able to plan any kind of future. The day it truly hit home, though, was when I received a letter addressed to me at No Fixed Abode. That was the day I slammed into the brick wall. It hit me. Of course, for me, the nightmare ended eventually, but the experience has changed me forever. I no longer pass the homeless on the street. I made it my business to get to know a lot of the rough sleepers in Oxford and beyond. It became clear to me that the epidemic of homelessness affecting our towns, cities, and villages is out of control. The system can't cope. Here in Oxford, we have good agencies and support. So why is the problem growing? I began to realize that some people find it hard to connect to the traditional pathways provided. As I talked to more and more of my friends, neighbors, and the homeless, like Neo themselves, it became clear that a different approach may be needed. Homes for All began to support and signpost the way forward for all kinds of homelessness. This community action group of people from disparate classes, politics, and walks of life are united in one endeavor, to find homes for all, regardless of circumstance. I and my friend Kim Marie began to search for working models elsewhere. We first heard of the ARC project online. We went along to Reading to see how it worked, and although that model may need tweaking for Oxford, it seemed to us that here was a proper solution. A double-decker bus that can act as a drop-in center during the day, helping people with advice and support. A mobile 10-bed sleeper bus at night that can take people who want to jumpstart their life for a week, give them respite to consider what their life could be like, and provide gateways to the full range of support services here. In Reading, as in our area, people often use drugs and alcohol as a means to escape from their miserable reality. They are unable to make meaningful decisions in such a confused state of mind. The bus is strictly drug and alcohol free. All meals, fresh clothes, and daily activities such as bowling, etc. are provided during the 5-day rest period. Our volunteers who have experienced homelessness, addictions, and chaotic lifestyles are able to provide the short-term support to enable guests to think clearly about rehab, perhaps, or connecting with family. We help them rediscover themselves and think clearly about their future. The key word here is mobile. We take them away from their normal haunts. The public have responded really well to the idea and are clamoring to help. There will be no shortage of volunteers here, just like Reading, where the support by the public and indeed police have been fantastic. So please support this motion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have 4, hopefully brief, points to make. First, this is, I have to say, slightly odd timing because Tomorrow there will be much more thorough discussion, the city conversation on rough sleeping, with up to 100 delegates from organisations on the front line of homelessness discussing the way forward in Oxford. There may, and I stress may, be potential for a mobile service, such as is being advocated here, in extending outreach to parts of Oxfordshire where services are lacking. I've therefore been very pleased to invite the ARC project and Homes for All to tomorrow's event, so they can get involved in the conversation. Second, we do have a real homelessness crisis, because local homelessness services are faced with the double whammy of increasing numbers of people becoming homeless on the one hand and funding cuts coming down from national government on the other. As the only local funder not to cut our homelessness budget, every penny of our funding is committed to making sure that those irreplaceable services can carry on. Therefore, unfortunately, I can't recommend diverting any of that funding. I note, by the way, the ARC project, and well done to them, is funded entirely by local churches and businesses and therefore doesn't take public resources from the other providers doing such a vital job. Third, this isn't a quick fix solution. The ARC project in Reading took well over a year and a lot of hard work to set up, with essential support from a major national drug rehab charity. I'm also hearing, I have to say, increasing doubts from the sector regarding the bus concept, including from the ARC project's chief exec, who was reported in the press last Monday as saying, quote, "We're having problems. There are 25 people we spoke to recently and not one of them took up the offer of help." That points out the complexity of the situation of homeless people and the complexity of their needs. So the last point is that we should respect that, the complexity and individuality of rough sleepers and their situations, because if we don't, we risk doing more harm than good or wasting resources which are so desperately needed. That's why I want our actions to be expert-led and non-party political. I haven't set the agenda for tomorrow, and I won't be leading any of the workshops. We must carry on listening, and not just to each other, and acting on what we hear. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you very much. When I saw this idea proposed, I was aware of the Isle of Wight service and indeed the Reading service, and then the press release from the Green Party drew attention to the potential for this service. And it struck me that we have here probably a good example of why tomorrow's symposium or conversation, or whatever the current phrase is, needs to happen. Because what we've had is a series of, over the last few months and last couple of years, of ideas which may or may not be good. But anyone who stands up and says that they're not sure about them is immediately lambasted. And I'm well aware that by standing up and doing this, that the next Carfax newsletter from the Green Party will do exactly that. But I thought I would ask some of the professionals who work in this field what they thought. And they used words like distraction, inadequate, dangerous. If anyone asked us for gaps in provision of service, this certainly wouldn't be what we put forward. But that's their professional opinion. Now, it may be that further exposure to the scheme, knowing more about it, having further conversations, would allay some of those fears. That's the point of having the conversation. But I think it's the second part of my conversation with those individuals, which I think is telling, and why we need to have the symposium tomorrow, and why we need to build on it, is because not a single one of them wanted to go into the public domain with their comments and their concerns. And what worries me is that because people are frightened to stick their head above the parapet and say, wait a minute, we need to pause and think. We need to think, is this the right way forward? Let's do some more work on it. Because they will be lambasted on social media or in the press or whatever, called uncaring, as I've no doubt I will be. Then we end up making not great or possibly even very bad policy decisions. That's what tomorrow's thing is supposed to be addressing, to make sure we make proper, informed, collaborative decisions in the best interest. So I would urge the Green Party to continue their support for this particular concept? Absolutely, because it's important to have as many options put forward as possible, but not to have policy made by press release, but by consensus.
Councillor Malik. And then we'll move to something else.
I think in this council, everybody on the principle will agree homeless needs to be tackled. When I work in a night time, I can see people struggling to find a place to sleep and the condition they sleep in the corridors and everything. And on the principle side and look and emotionally side, yes, we should do, and I think we are doing a lot. This council, what just Councillor Riley has pointed out. More like mine is the question to Councillor Simmons. I mean, where would this bus will sit when we are talking about zero emission coming in, etc.? So is a one-off for 1 year he's asking for, or is a continuation of something? Because when you want to allocate public fund, you need to be seen responsible person. What's your strategies and how this thing will help in a longer run? You know, what kind of fuel this bus will run. I don't have that much information. I mean, what the other have Google and I've seen the same project, which is a great project, probably work in the city of Reading. But either is going to work in Oxford or not. Perhaps when he sums up, answer that, please. Thank you.
Get the right thing.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm proud to say that as Lib Dems we support this motion unreservedly. We're talking here about the starkest kind of homelessness, people with nowhere to spend the night. This is an emergency situation, and if the junk bus got underway, and £20,000 isn't a great deal of money for a city as rich as ours, it could be underway by the beginning of January, at a time when the weather is at its worst. I'd like to mention the Housing and Homelessness Strategy Commitment, which is to ensure adequate crisis accommodation, including winter and severe weather provision. But the point at which severe weather provision is triggered is currently a prediction of 3 successive nights of 0 temperatures. This should be, it is actually, this should be reconsidered. My fridge at home runs at 4 degrees, and you wouldn't want to spend the night in my fridge. It is not reasonable that it should be as low as 0 temperature for 3 successive nights. The churches and other institutions offering crisis accommodation are given ongoing training and support, but additional places are needed. This bus will provide 10 beds. It's absolutely vital that we should have this by the beginning of January, and I commend everybody in this chamber to support this motion tonight.
Thank you.
Councillor Simmons, would you like to sum up?
Thank you very much. We seem to be getting into a situation where Mike sort of says, Councillor Rowley says, he seems to think it might be a good idea, but, and there's always a but. There's never really actually a real consideration of an idea with facts and evidence to back it up. He talks about talking to experts. Well, I was at the meeting that you spoke at, Mike, in the college, one of the university colleges, when we had, you spoke alongside people from Aspire and other groups, where the conclusion of the meeting was that people without a local connection are the ones that are not currently dealt with by our services, our current service provision. And you gave quite a robust reason for why that was. It's because, I wouldn't say opening the floodgates because those weren't your words. I mean, it was far more reasonable considered than that. But you said, obviously, we can only cope with a certain number of people and etc. But this is a way of capturing those people, which all the people in the homeless organisations know are a group which are not dealt with effectively by our current service provision. And these are the people, when you have the open house, and I was around the open houses when they were occupying buildings and talking to people there, just about, I'd say 80 or 90% of those people there were people without a local connection. They didn't really have an opportunity. And you speak to Aspire and you speak to these other groups and they feel terrible because they can only give a certain amount of help to people that don't have a local connection. And this is a very cost-effective way, a proven model for helping people without a local connection. And it's quite sad that you won't even consider it. And this all this motion asks you to do is consider it. Consider providing them with £20,000, and it's not taking money away from existing housing budget. It's disingenuous to suggest that. If you look at the motion, it's very clear. It's about taking it from underspends and other sources of information. It's not about stealing money from the homelessness pot. It's about using other sources of funding. And to address Councillor Malik's point about where the bus would sit, well, in Reading, what happens is a number of businesses volunteered to provide locations for the buses in their car parks in the evening when otherwise not occupied. And we would expect similar sorts of things to happen here. You can talk about what fuel it would have, but that's a question you can ask about every bus that's in the city. But yes, there are ways of, I mean, the Green Party has a big double-decker bus that runs on, chip fat. I mean, it's perfectly possible to have renewable fuels, and I think that's a bit of an aside. It's actually really a point about providing for the homeless people. This is an opportunity to take forward a new idea. Yes, take it to your conversation. I would like to think that you would take more part in it than just not sharing it and taking a back seat. I think you probably have a good overview, as much as anyone, of what the issues are in this city. And this is a great way for solving it. It's just asking you to consider, and not voting for it is really quite shameful. And I hope you will reconsider.
Thank you. Now we need to vote. Those in favour of the motion, please show.
Shame on you lot. Disgusting.
Thank you. And those against? We will move on to the next motion. We have about 20 minutes left of our hour for motions. We have a long motion from Councillor Tidball on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Please, can you propose your motion? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to say very briefly, we will be rejecting the amendments to this motion, which I'm happy to give reasons for in my summing up, but I don't want to give time to at this point. The Conservative government have failed disabled people. They've failed to protect our human rights and to understand what it means to be a disabled person living in the United Kingdom today. In a detailed process starting in 2013 and concluding in October of this year, the United Nations told the Conservative government that its social cuts policy is a human catastrophe for disabled people. The UN made the causes of the human catastrophe clear. The ideologically driven and disproportionate impact of austerity measures and anti-poverty initiatives introduced by the coalition government from 2010 onwards. We must understand urgently how the 128,800 people with disabilities living in Oxfordshire, including 8,800 children, have been affected by the evidence revealed by the UN. The impact this human catastrophe has had on the standard of living of disabled people in the UK is scandalous. The UN found severe economic constraints among adults with disabilities and families with children with disabilities, including increased reliance on food banks. Families with a disabled adult and a disabled child will lose more than £5,500 a year as a result of the tax and benefit changes of both governments since 2010. As City Executive Board member for Children, Young People and Public Health, I am deeply perturbed by the UN's findings that nothing has been done to address the poverty of many families with children with disabilities. From the evidence the UN found, they make a direct connection between the state's treatment of disabled people and the terrible rise in stigma and negative perceptions that we live a life of less value than that of others. It breaks my heart that it has taken the United Nations, an international body, to point out the evidence that it is children with disabilities who are consequently experiencing increased incidents of bullying, hate speech, and hate crime happening in our country. I'm sure it breaks yours too. Beyond this, the UN uncovered numerous restrictions to legal aid caused by barriers to disabled people's access to justice and raised concerns about the low number of persons with disabilities holding elected office. Our voices will not be silenced. That's why I am proud that sat in the public gallery today are some of the Oxford Labour Disability Network candidates selected to stand for Labour in the City Council elections in May 2018. I hope that in the year we celebrate a centenary of universal suffrage,
They are elected to these benches to fight the Tories' despicable policies. So I urge you to support this important motion. Thank you.
Councillor Paule, secondly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Is this on? Yes. I want to support Councillor Tidball, both as somebody with care and responsibilities and with some examples of what the Commission's findings look like at the point where the cuts meet real life. Paragraph 81 of the October report states that from the start of the inquiry until 2015, public funding of adult social care was reduced by 4.6 billion, or 31%. As a consequence, it states, local authorities reduced their spending and cut services that have been of importance to persons with disabilities. Locally, this has meant cuts of 18 million to adult social care, including the closure of 22 of the county's 30-day centres, transport to day services, dementia support and financial support for carers. This means if you're the parent of a child with learning disabilities or the carer for someone with dementia, the closure of a day centre means a withdrawal of respite and an increase in isolation and stress for both you and the person using the centre. It means you may have to find money to pay to go for a centre that's further away, if you're lucky enough to get a place and if you're lucky enough that your bus hasn't been cut. It may mean that the carer has to give up working hours and then find the money to heat the home for extra hours. And if you're one of Oxford's young carers under 16 and we have double the national average, it means that day when you get to catch up with your homework or just to catch up with your friends has gone. Disabled people are hit from multiple directions by austerity measures, placing them at increased risk. The bedroom tax means that some families with a disabled child cannot get a good night's sleep because they can't afford the penalty for a separate bedroom. The 2011 Pensions Act means that the woman caring for an elderly parent is plunged into poverty because she's now unable to draw a state pension until she's 67, but she can't earn because of her care duties. In April 2013, the coalition government cut legal aid from almost all social welfare cases, including disability benefits. Only the direst cases can now claim. The other services that are provided to meet the shortfall, such as telephone helplines, really are of little use to people who may not be able to use a telephone or to understand the very lengthy documentation. Most disabled people can't afford to pay for legal representation to challenge cuts to their support. And even when they can, they all too often find that while their case seems reasonable to anyone with a shred of humanity, it's not legal. A local man, for example, who is blind, quadriplegic and suffers from cerebral palsy, had his care budget slashed by more than half. But the clearly sympathetic judge could not find it in his favour because the coalition enshrined this cruelty in law. So I'm proud to second Councillor Tidball's motion, and I urge Council to support its condemnation of the state's assault on disabled people's well-being. And as someone with caring responsibilities, I applaud its call for the county to collect and confront the evidence of the ongoing harm done to disabled people locally.
We have an amendment from Councillor Brandt.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you for those contributions. I'd like to thank Councillor Tidball for drawing Council's attention to this report. It's clearly an important one. It makes uncomfortable reading. It is not pretty. And the reasoning behind my amendment, the reason that I can't support the motion that's drafted, is that the intention of my amendment is to try and make the motion do what I think we would all want it to do. It's partly about the wording, which I think in places does not achieve what we would want. It's partly about, frankly, where the motion chooses to put the blame, which is not entirely in the right place. And it's also about calling for something which actually has a chance of actually happening. So first of all, can I just directly address the record of my party in government? It was Nick Clegg who said in 2012 that, I quote, "Many Conservatives believed that no one could possibly be out of work unless they were scroungers," and criticised what he called the siren voices of the Tory right who peddled this myth, obtained and got a reduction in the proposed Tory cut of 10 billion from the welfare budget to something a little over a third of that amount. Draconian Tory policies on child benefit and housing benefit were dropped because of Lib Dem pressure in government. Lib Dem peers got specific commitments on PIPs, including a halving of the time that seriously disabled people wait to be eligible, and Lord Mike German in the House of Lords secured an amendment helping people with deteriorating conditions to get the support group rate of employment support allowance. And, of course, Lib Dem policies in government continue to help the most vulnerable even after the ending of the coalition, including the pupil premium, which, as members across the chamber will know from their own work, can and does directly support the needs of children with special educational needs and disabilities, and also policies like raising the income tax threshold, a Liberal Democrat policy in coalition which addresses the needs of the most vulnerable people in our society. The other difficulty with the motion, as unamended, is what it calls for, a public inquiry. Public inquiries cost millions, usually tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions. And why? Well, in the words of one inquiry chair, it is because, and I quote, lawyers are expensive, very expensive. That same chair, Lady Justice Smith, reflected that if the success of public inquiries is to be judged in terms of changes in regulations and legislation, then we cannot often claim to achieve that. Positive proposals can be very slow to emerge, and even if they eventually do, they're often diluted. It's an issue of great regret to me. And there's no mention in this motion of what government spending would be cut to pay for this inquiry. Independent panels, no lawyers, have achieved good results. And the same applies to the call to Oxfordshire County Council to spend its own precious and dwindling resources on a retrospective review. We want the same things. The motion as amended would actually achieve them.
And your seconder for the amendment? Councillor Wade, do you wish to speak now? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I am going to oppose the amendment, and then I wasn't going to speak until Nick Clegg's name was mentioned. and let me remind the council, Lord Mayor, he was the same man who made the promise to the students as well, and just putting his foot next to 10 Downing Street, becoming a deputy prime minister than what he did. I mean, what Councillor Gent is saying, you got to share a burden because it was your party who given the shoulder to that minority run, and then you went for some ministerial cars basically in the end. So you cannot be seen not to blame where we are. Continuously the cut went from bad to worse. So that's all I wanted to add on that one.
Councillor Rowley?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd just like to say something briefly on, if I may, on the impact of all the changes that have been made to support for disabled people in this country.
And this is on the amendment, yes? Sorry? Only on the amendment.
My apologies, then I should wait until...
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Councillor Azad, were you on the amendment or on the whole motion? Right, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? No, in which case... Sorry? Marie, sorry, Marie. Yes, of course you can. Apologies, yeah.
I would like to speak. We reject the Lib Dem amendments as a distraction from the core issues. I'm disappointed that in presenting these amendments, those on the opposite bench do not show the integrity of their party colleagues. Baroness Brinton, a wheelchair user, who did have the humility to admit the party had to rebuild the trust of disabled people after what happened under the coalition government. Their amendments fail to help to achieve this. We reject these amendments as an attempt at rewriting history about the role the Lib Dems played in government with the Tories. They are inaccurate, and just as when in government with those same Tories, they do dilute our resolution and give them the opportunity to be let off the hook. Let's be clear, the Liberal Democrat leader, Vince Cable, when a coalition government cabinet member, voted for the introduction of bedroom tax, the reduction of local government funding in both 2011 and 2015, a reduction in personal independence payment, and to restrict the amount of benefits for people with a cancer diagnosis. I'm not really sure what the ableist equivalent of mansplaining is, but I wish the opposition leader had taken as much time actually reading the UN inquiry reports as he did applying tortuous and inaccurate changes to our motion. If he had, he would have found that indeed page 20 of the 2016 UN inquiry report specifically cited the data on the loss of Motability cars and JSA sanctions. Not only is he a part of the party which facilitated the horrific treatment of disabled people in the 2010 to 2015 period, he also wants to dilute any recourse to actually establishing the impact of its policies for people in Oxfordshire. We need to know urgently how people in our city and beyond have been affected and hold the government to account, especially when the UN committee itself found the state party has not conducted a comprehensive human rights-based cumulative impact assessment, even though reliable sources have indicated it is feasible. Would he like to give us a reasonable cost of the lives of disabled people and the increased poverty they are facing? The UN also raised specific concerns in concluding observations last month about the fact that responsibility for supporting independent living has been transferred to devolved administrations and local authorities without providing appropriate and earmarked budget allocation. And the lack of a unified data collection system and indicators across the state party concerning the situation of persons with disabilities. We reject, therefore, his amendment in its entirety and wish he'd spent more time understanding how his party's role in coalition government has directly affected the lives of people with disabilities and lent his energy instead in trying to ameliorate that impact on the residents of this city and Oxfordshire.
We're still discussing the amendment and not all the history behind it, I'm afraid. Councillor Wade, would you like to speak now before we sum up and vote on the amendment? Well, you should do, as you're a seconder. It is you then to speak now. No? Doesn't have to. All right, if you don't wish to, that's fine. In that case, we ask Councillor Gant to sum up on the amendment. Thank you.
Well, all right, Lord Mayor. First of all, I'd be interested to hear the details of what I said, which was inaccurate. I will be following that up. Secondly, look, this is what my amendment calls on the government to do. Formally acknowledge and recognise the findings of the UN report, respond in detail to its assessment of the negative impacts of government policy on disabled people, acknowledge and apologise for those negative impacts and state clearly its intention to reverse them. I'm trying to make this motion do what I believe this council would want it to do. It is partly a question of wording. I'd say to members opposite that if they vote for it unamended, they're voting for the following sentence: the breaches by the UK government of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities cut across the totality of the lives of disabled persons, with the UN committee finding there is a disabled people have reduced access to employment, and where they do have access it is less well paid and secure. This is a resolution of a deliberative assembly. It needs to say what it means. That is what I have tried to do here. I would like to invite members opposite to read my amendment and to ask themselves, not just what their party whip told them, whether what it does is something that we can achieve, or whether they would prefer to go home with a warm glow for having made political points.
Right, we ought to vote on the amendment now. Those in favour of the amendment, please show. Thank you. Amendment is lost. We have about 4 minutes, I think, in total. Councillor Azad and Councillor Rowley, you both wish to say something on the main motion. Can I ask that you have 2 minutes each? Seriously, we have 5 minutes until we're going to have to close down. So, Councillor Hayes, will you also, can you have another 2 minutes as well? Sorry, we cannot have everybody or we won't be able to vote. Okay?
Sorry, Chair, I did avoid speaking on amendments. I could speak on the substantive.
Yes, well, I'm sorry about that. Time has taken over a bit.
Well, can I suggest just so we can have...
If you want to have 1 minute each, perhaps?
Yes.
How about that? Giving me really short. Councillor Azad, if you start, and Rowley, Hayes and Simmons. Okay?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to support this motion fully, and I thank you, Marie, to bring this motion into this council. And every word of this motion, I agree. And I'm glad that she's put down to protect the right of women and girls from disabilities and ethnic minority groups. protect the right of persons from black and minority ethnic backgrounds. And I like this council to review what the government is doing to fulfill its own Public Sector Equality Act, not only on disability, but as well as black, Asian, minority ethnic groups. And this council should recognize the majority of their employees are women. Many are in part-time jobs, and action need to be taken to ensure that their workforce reflects safety and diversity. And council should get staff from all background and all diverse community what they serve in this Oxford city. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A word on what is happening to disabled people. I'm going to be very vague for reasons that will become obvious. I've spoken a number of times with a disabled person worried about what's described as the migration from existing disability benefits to Pegg, personal independence payment. More recently, I helped to restrain that person from running into a busy road. We can do these things, we can patch things up, we can stop disasters from happening, but the question is, where has the human dignity gone? Why are people in that position? We can do an impact assessment, we can even do a cost-benefit analysis into an impact assessment, but what is needed is a sea change in government policy. Please vote for the motion.
Councillor Hayes.
Because 20 seconds of this is actually a tribute to you, I'm going to take 90 seconds if that's all right. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of working with some disabled campaigners from the 1990s who fought for a civil rights bill that ended up with what the Conservatives gave them, which was the DDA. And 2 years ago, I asked them, what's the difference between now and the 1990s? And they responded with everything and nothing. And what they meant by nothing is that there are continuing to be problems in disabled people accessing the workplace, even though they want to work. The employment rate for Oxford's disabled population of working age is 62% compared with an employment rate of 80% for working age non-disabled people. And when they say that everything has changed, what they mean by that is that whereas in the 1990s they were fighting to be treated not as second-class citizens, now they say they're fighting for their lives. They feel like independent living, one of the greatest successes of the last 20 years, is something which is slowly but surely slipping away from view. And listening to people who are affected by the decisions you take is something which is extremely important. When I worked for Andrew Smith, who was a minister who brought through the DDA in the first term of the Labour government, he told me about how local disabled people would advocate directly to him and they would shape directly national disability policy. Now I'm saying that because I was taken aback to these amendments by Councillor Gant. It doesn't feel like these are the results of conversations with local disabled people. In fact, as Marie says, it feels like these are an attempt to rewrite history. And I'm more than taken aback, I'm upset. And the reason I'm upset is that I've got two disabled parents who are paying the bedroom tax, which was brought in by Vince Cable. This is personal for so many people. The Lib Dems were clearly a junior partner. Norman Lamb tried to do an awful
Stick
lot.
to the amendment. I'm sorry, Councillor Hayes. I think we should all remember that we all agree that the situation out there is grim. We just, exact words we use for it is slightly different, but I think nobody in this chamber, I'm quite sure, is feeling anything other than awful what has happened to people with disabilities. Can I just make that absolutely clear? We may slightly differ on other things, but that I'm quite sure we all agree on. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief. It's very interesting this meeting's been bookended by two sort of reports and statements from the UN. We've had the UN reporting about the treatment of Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, talking about the very human tragedy out there, and here we have the UN also talking about a very human catastrophe on our own doorstep, and I think that just makes it all the more resonant and all the more important that we do pass this motion. We do send an extremely strong message to this government and future governments. It doesn't really matter who's in power, it's actually the principles that are important. I think that's where we should be focusing. And do you know also the response of the UK government? I was just looking up to the report. It was just, it would be laughable if it wasn't so sad. The UK government spokesman said after hearing this, they said, the UK is a recognised world leader in disability rights and equality. Can you believe that? that. I mean, that's just absolutely, that's well, I mean, it's beyond explanation. And it's interesting as well, it's the 600,000 disabled people. We were talking about 600,000 Rohingya Muslims affected. I mean, this is a tragedy and a catastrophe on our own doorstep, and I think I really welcome, thank you very much, Reed, for putting this together. It's really important we do that. But I also think we shouldn't forget that a lot of what we do can have an impact, intended or unintended, in this council chamber. And I will talk to you about, I only had a call the other day, which I've taken on a change we made to council tax, which is unintentionally affecting these people to do with suspended students. The change we made in the summer. And all those students are suspended because of issues around mental health or disability and intending to resume their studies. So unintentionally, we might actually also be making this problem worse. It's very important we don't. So let's really pass this, and I hope we have a unanimous support for this, but let's also not forget this stuff we can still be doing better locally.
Can I say that we have overrun by 5 or 10 minutes? I hope we can retrospectively amend that support suspending standing orders for those few minutes. Yes? Excellent, thank you. And we will then leave Marie to sum up, and then we will vote. Okay, thank you.
I'm grateful for the contributions made by those around this chamber in support of the motion as originally written. Oxford City Council believes in the fundamental dignity of and respect for disabled people. In this UK Disability History Month, this council must send a resounding message to government that it abhors the Conservative government's treatment of disabled people and recognises the evidence and conclusions drawn in the UN government's report. We find the level and nature of the government's response to these findings shameful. I therefore urge you to support this motion.
Thank you. Right, those in favour of the motion as amended, please.
There should be